The story begins by introducing a legendary figure, Gunther Plassley, the hero of the Belowe continent. He was a hero of great strength and intelligence, who remained humble and brought peace to the once chaotic continent. Even 300 years later, the legend of the hero, a knight in resplendent armor, continues to be passed down. A narrator recalls their childhood admiration for the hero, aspiring to become someone just like him. However, that dream is shattered by the grim reality of a bloodied, tearful woman with wavy, light-colored hair. She collapses in despair, lamenting that she never wished for such a tragic end. A gauntleted hand reaches down, catching a single white feather as it descends toward her. A shadowy figure with glowing red eyes embraces the unconscious woman amidst a field of flowers. The scene shifts to 1 month ago at the magnificent Lastonian imperial palace under a full moon. A man with black hair scoffs at the Empress, his thoughts turning to someone named Laurent with a pained expression. The narrative introduces Maria Coburg, Empress of Lastonia, a woman with blonde hair and glasses, diligently writing at her desk. Empress Maria pauses her work, her expression a mask of cool determination. The sound of hurried footsteps echoes through a dimly lit grand hall. Empress Maria walks with purpose down a long corridor, a man in a dark suit trailing behind her. A dark-haired man, identified as Henry Coburg, Emperor of Lastonia, addresses her with a weary look. The Emperor asks if the event has begun, and the Empress confirms she has only just arrived as well. He expresses surprise, stating he didn't expect the Empress to come. With a hint of sarcasm, the Emperor acknowledges her consideration for his busy schedule. Empress Maria firmly declares her right to be present, and the Emperor smirks, noting the depth of her resolve. The Emperor invites her inside, and she agrees, her gaze somber as they approach the ornate doorway. They enter a grand, sunlit room where several people are already gathered and waiting. A group of nobles turns to watch as the imperial couple makes their entrance. Seated on a lavish red couch is Monica Coburg, the stern-faced former Empress of Lastonia. A woman's pained cry echoes through the palace. A woman with reddish-brown hair, Laurent Sérieux, screams in the agony of childbirth. The Emperor anxiously calls out Laurent's name, but the former Empress, Monica, sharply orders him to maintain his composure. Empress Maria stops in her tracks, looking down with a troubled and hesitant expression. Her mind flashes back to 1 year ago, when His Majesty took a concubine. That concubine was the vibrant and smiling Laurent Sérieux from the Kingdom of Landis. The Empress recalls that the decision was unavoidable, as her 10-year failure to produce an heir had created a succession crisis. The situation grew more tense when the concubine, Laurent, became pregnant. As the former Empress's oppression intensified, she confronted Maria, demanding the title of first-class administrator for young Master Villette. Maria notes the Chancellor would have opposed the appointment, but the former Empress screams that's precisely why she's being told separately. The former Empress rages at Maria's father's interference and her inability to secure even a minor position for their faction. Whining that she already promised the position to Villette, the former Empress decides to simply send him a gift instead. Empress Maria smiles slyly, suggesting the gift be sent in the name of Her Majesty, the former Empress. The former Empress asks how much to send, and Maria suggests 2 top-grade mana stones, earning praise for her commendable idea. The 2 women stand opposite each other in a vast, empty hall, the tension palpable between them. The former Empress looks on in disbelief, asking, "What?" Empress Maria coolly explains that since the former Empress's funds are exhausted, her family, House Stuart, will have to provide the mana stones. She adds a veiled threat, saying if anyone asks about the funds, she'll truthfully state they were a gift for another of the former Empress's countless lovers. With a final, piercing gaze, Empress Maria announces her departure, leaving the other woman standing alone. She walks away, leaving the former Empress speechless and defeated in the grand hall. As Empress Maria stands outside the closed door, a sudden scream of rage erupts from within. The sound of something shattering accompanies the former Empress's furious curse against the insolent wretch who defied her. Empress Maria remains perfectly still and composed, her back to the commotion. She reflects that while others indulge in pleasure, she has no time to waste on anger or regret. Her duty is to spend her days cleaning up the messes they carelessly abandon as she presides over a meeting with officials. She must stand tall before others, for she is the Empress of Lastonia, shown in full regalia, holding a staff of office. That duty, she concludes, is the very reason she is here now, sitting stoically beside the Emperor. In a hazy memory, a weakened Laurent calls out to the Emperor as he rushes toward her, yelling her name. Lying in bed, Laurent vows to give birth to the emperor's child, but he insists that her safety is his only priority. As the memory of Laurent tearfully begging the emperor to be safe fades, Empress Maria watches from afar, sarcastically calling the display touching. The former empress, Monica, sips her drink and coldly remarks that the emperor is overflowing with emotion. She muses that his reaction is natural for the first heir in 10 years, especially from the woman he loves, as a single tear escapes her eye. With her back turned to the drama, Empress Maria states she only wishes for Lady Laurent and the child to be safe. Monica sneers at Maria, calling her shameless and asking if she feels any guilt for being a woman who cannot bear a child. The cruel insult, a barren woman, echoes as the Empress's hand clenches into a fist. Maria stands her ground, questioning why she must listen to such words when the royal physician has confirmed she is not barren. She starts to confront the former Empress, but is interrupted by a piercing scream from Laurent's room, turning her head in alarm. As a man announces the birth of a prince, Empress Maria is stunned into disbelief. The former Empress also reacts with shock, repeating the news in a hushed question. A blonde-haired noble furiously objects to calling a concubine's illegitimate child a prince while the Empress is present. The Emperor stumbles back, his face a mask of profound grief. Empress Maria's thoughts drift back to the past, remembering words he once told her. She recalls him confessing his love, promising he had never considered anyone but her as his empress. Back in the present, she faces him as he calls her name, his expression now cold and distant. A cruel, unsettling smile spreads across the emperor's face. He shatters her world with 2 words: divorce me. A torrential downpour begins, mirroring the storm in her heart. Outside the palace window, the rain falls relentlessly against the glass. Her mind goes numb, hit by the suddenness of his demand for a divorce. The Empress's hand trembles uncontrollably by her side. When she reminds him she is still young, he coldly dismisses her, stating he only wants a child born from Laurent. Meanwhile, the exhausted Laurent thinks of her love for Henry. Overhearing her, the Emperor turns away from Maria and anxiously calls out Laurent's name. Maria glares after him, internally condemning Laurent as a filthy woman who cares only for power. She recalls that Laurent Saradeau is not only a noble from Landes, but also the niece of the former Empress, Monica. A year ago, Laurent had arrived as part of a diplomatic delegation. Maria clenches her fist, wondering if the meeting between the Emperor and the former Empress was truly a coincidence. The Emperor callously tells Laurent she can make the child a prince if she wishes, causing Maria to cry out his name in pain. Empress Maria stands firm, declaring that while she will acknowledge the child, she will never agree to a divorce. The Emperor stares at her, shocked by her sudden defiance. His shock turns to rage as he shouts that he is the Emperor and questions if she intends to defy him to the very end. He screams her name, threateningly asking if she truly believes he can't have her removed as Empress. Alone now, Maria sits with a look of quiet, unshakable resolve. The chapter's title appears over an ornate crest. A new chapter begins, showing the palace silhouetted against a starry night sky. A single dark feather drifts down from the sky. The scene focuses on a cascade of long, wavy, light-colored hair. The woman is revealed to be Empress Maria, who glances over her shoulder with a serious expression. She stands alone, lost in thought by the window. Her personal maid, Nancy Ackman, worriedly asks about the word divorce she overheard. Maria dismisses her concern, claiming she was just out for a walk, but Nancy is not convinced. The Empress asks if the preparations are finished. Nancy nervously confirms, questioning the need for a sword and riding gear. As Nancy expresses her disbelief, Maria ties back her hair and confirms her maid's fears are true. With grim certainty, Empress Maria declares that Henry's soldiers are coming for her tonight. Nancy panics, asking if Her Majesty is planning to fight the Emperor. Maria calmly turns away, stating that she is not trying to fight. Grasping the hilt of her sword, she declares her intention is to end this, as a month of conflict over the child's registration has passed. As the scales of justice loom, a narrator declares the time has come to end this, while Nancy worriedly asks if the Emperor will listen to Her Majesty. Empress Maria turns to her maid with a confident smile, asking Nancy if she remembers something important from their past. She begins to recall their childhood, when she and Henry would make bets whenever they sparred. In a flashback, a young Maria stands victorious over a defeated Henry, reminding him of their unbreakable rule. The victor's words must always be obeyed. Returning to the present, Maria stands with her back to a concerned Nancy, her resolve hardening. Maria suddenly turns and embraces her distraught maid, who cries out her name in surprise. Nancy tearfully pledges her loyalty, and Maria reassures her, saying she has always considered her a sister. Nancy, flustered but touched, accepts Her Majesty's heartfelt words with a nervous smile. Maria walks away, stating it's a relief, and revealing she has already warned her parents to seek shelter from Henry's inevitable wrath against House Stuart. She understands the grave danger everyone she cares about faces if she fails, and can only pray for their safe escape. Suddenly, a frantic Nancy bursts in, urging Her Majesty to flee as the royal guards are rapidly approaching. With a fierce glint in her eyes, Maria firmly grips her sword and gives the order, "Let's go!" The scene shifts to the palace grounds under the dark of night. The Emperor, Henry, stands with sword in hand, confronting Empress Maria and her few loyal attendants. The royal guards kneel before him, groaning in defeat after an apparent struggle with Maria's group. Henry looks upon the Empress, his expression unreadable as he speaks her name. Standing her ground despite being disheveled, Maria pleads with him not to harm her people, insisting they were merely following orders. Maria bravely challenges him to a duel, proposing that if she wins, he must listen to her one last time. He scoffs, questioning why he should agree. She taunts him, asking if he's afraid to face her even after she hasn't touched a sword in 10 years, striking a nerve. His pride stung. The Emperor furiously agrees and draws his blade. With a roar, Henry charges, shouting for her to come at him as their swords clash in a shower of sparks. As they fight, Maria reflects on her upbringing, remembering she was taught all the skills befitting a noble lady. She recalls that swordsmanship was one of those lessons, and her talent was so great she even passed the knight's exam. But she had to give up her dream because Henry opposed it, a memory that fuels the clash of their blades. The duel rages on, their determined faces locked in a tense standoff. Henry accuses her of needing to be better than him at everything, but she coolly asks if he knew something else about her. He delivers a devastating blow, not with his sword, but with his words. "Your father has committed treason." Taking advantage of her shock, he strikes and disarms her, while falsely accusing her father, James Stuart, of attempting to assassinate him. Reeling from the lie, Maria cries out that his accusation is ridiculous. Her sword flies from her grasp as the force of his attack overwhelms her. Defeated, Maria falls to her knees, her sword clattering on the stone ground before her as Henry stands triumphant. She realizes her momentary hesitation at the absurd accusation created an opening for him, as he coldly tells her she'll soon learn the truth. With a cruel smirk, the Emperor condemns her as the daughter of a traitor. He commands his guards to seize Maria and take her away, her desperate cry of "No!" echoing in the night. As she's dragged away, her last thoughts are of her father and mother. The scene fades to a somber sunset, focusing on a pair of armored boots standing on scorched earth. A guard reports to a silhouetted figure that it's already too late. A formidable knight in black and red armor, wearing a horned helmet, appears against a burning sky. The Stuart estate is shown completely engulfed in flames. The red-haired, armored knight looks on with a grim, determined expression at the blazing destruction. A close-up shows the intricate detail of the imposing, battle-worn armor. Elsewhere, a group of nobles gathers, whispering amongst themselves about the recent events. Maria sits huddled on the cold, cracked floor of a cell, utterly broken and alone. A voice narrates the horrific outcome. All of her people are dead, save for Nancy and a few attendants. She internally screams in anguish, questioning how Henry could so easily slaughter so many innocent people. In the throne room, a smirking Henry addresses the captive Maria Stuart as a traitor, and she can only whisper his name in despair. Before the court, Henry formally accuses Maria and her father of conspiring against him as Laurent and the former Empress look on. He coldly asks if she admits to the false charges. Maria erupts in defiance, reminding him that her father, Duke James, became chancellor at his own request. Pleading her father's case, she demands to know how a man of such loyalty could ever plot a rebellion. A dark-haired man in a formal red uniform sternly addresses Maria as a traitor, telling her to read the paper before her. Bound and desperate, the Empress learns the paper details a plot to depose Emperor Henry Coburg, written in her own father's hand, and she whispers, "How?" in disbelief. Staring at the document, she recognizes the handwriting and questions how this could possibly be her father's work. The Emperor smirks, taunting her with the seemingly undeniable evidence as she looks down in despair. A dark-haired woman remarks that Maria's father, James, was too greedy, intending to rule through his daughter as a puppet empress. In a flashback, the same woman gently holds a baby named William, asking if he is hungry. The memory turns dark as the woman falls into an abyss, her offer to fetch milk echoing in the void. Returning to the present, Maria challenges the Emperor, questioning if a mere piece of paper can prove treason, shocking him into silence. She argues that the letter is a forgery, pointing out that it lacks the unique official seal of House Stuart. As Maria calls for an objective investigation, the enraged Emperor roars, "Silence!" furious that she dares to lecture him. He threatens to silence her just as he did her father, but she defiantly asks what crime either of them has committed. Maria passionately recounts her and her father's unwavering loyalty to the empire, contrasting their service with the former empress's decadence and questioning his accusations. As the nobles stir, the emperor erupts in fury, slapping his own mother and calling Maria an insane wench for exposing her treasonous heart. Maria's eye widens in pure shock at the emperor's cruelty. On the floor, the emperor's mother scoffs at their slander, questioning if tearing others down is enough to rule the empire. The emperor tells his mother to stop, insisting her delicate hands shouldn't be harmed, while a weakened Maria coughs. An archbishop reads a decree announcing the Lastonia Empire will cut ties with the papacy and eradicate House Stuart for their attempt on the emperor's life. At the emperor's command, guards begin dragging the bodies of the condemned into the grand hall. Maria watches in horror as the decree is read aloud, sentencing Duke James Stuart and his followers to immediate execution for treason. The judgment then falls upon Maria Coburg, who is tormented by visions of her dead father and mother. Bloodied and defeated, Maria looks up at the emperor and whispers, "No way." Stepping forward, Maria confronts Emperor Henry, demanding to know if he burned down her family's estate. A sword is drawn, its polished blade reflecting the cold light of the hall. Raising his sword over the kneeling Maria, Emperor Henry issues a grim warning to the court. Any who dare to challenge him will meet the same fate. Splat, the blade descends, and a spray of blood marks Maria's brutal execution. Maria's eyes are wide with pain and shock, tears streaming down her face as she gasps. The emperor's mother observes the execution with a cold, unsettlingly calm expression. Life fades from Maria's eyes as she thinks her final "ah," and her body begins to fall. A final glimpse of Maria's blood-stained face shows her life has ended. Thud. Maria's body hits the floor, and her attendants rush to her side, crying out for their majesty to stay with them. Two nobles demand the execution of Maria Stuart, calling the traitor's child a threat to the future. The court erupts into a frenzy, with shouts to hang her and kill her echoing through the hall as her attendants weep over her body. Suddenly, the emperor's attention is drawn elsewhere as he turns to the archbishop, demanding to know what is happening. A soldier reports that the Crimson Army has invaded and cannot be stopped, causing a tear of fear to stream down the emperor's face. Amidst the fire and chaos of the conquered palace, a fearsome, red-haired warrior in dark armor makes his entrance. Emperor Henry stares in utter disbelief and terror at the invading force. The narration describes the imposing figure, highlighting his blood-red hair and a menacing dragon mask. The court gasps in recognition of Heland, the great king, as Emperor Henry trembles in fear. Unaware of the invasion, the Empress's attendants continue to grieve, pleading for their fallen majesty to stay with them. A small boy with light hair and golden eyes cries out, pleading as he watches the tragic scene unfold. The imposing, masked King Heland strides toward the dying Empress and the crying child. A beautiful, tragic vision shows the Empress bound, but surrounded by a bed of blooming flowers. A portrait of the masked King Heland emphasizes his powerful and mysterious aura. The story shifts to introduce the Kingdom of Heland, a powerful nation established by scattered mercenaries. Though once dismissed by other royals as a barbaric nation, Heland's immense wealth and strength have made them impossible to ignore. Many countries, including Lastonia, have become indebted to Heland, having borrowed emergency funds from them. When debts go unpaid, Heland's elite Crimson Army personally arrives to collect what is owed. Through the slits of his mask, King Heland's piercing gaze sweeps over the conquered throne room. In the aftermath of the invasion, King Heland kneels before two young women on the floor as the deposed Emperor Henry watches helplessly from his throne. Two of Heland's warriors, one carrying a massive axe, stand by with menacing smiles, relishing their victory. At the sacred Lastonia Imperial Palace, nobles gossip about the barbaric heretics of the Crimson Army, questioning their place. Another noble agrees, calling them lucky savages, while looking over a vast, resource-rich northern landscape. The scene shifts to a masked warrior in black armor carrying a bound, unconscious woman with light-colored hair. A close-up reveals the formidable red-haired warrior in his horned, red-visored helmet and silver armor. He clenches his armored fist, a silent, menacing gesture. A large, ornate sword is strapped to his back, ready for battle. He makes a grand entrance, shocking the assembled nobles with his imposing presence. The nobles whisper in confusion, wondering why the King of Heland has come to the palace. One man clenches his fist, realizing a troubling rumor must be true. The rumor is confirmed. King Henry is deeply in debt to the intimidating King of Heland. A flustered, black-haired man in a royal uniform asks the King of Heland why he came in person. The masked king reminds him that tomorrow is the day to repay the debt, questioning if he's forgotten their agreement. The black-haired man stammers that he would never forget, internally cursing his lack of funds. He panics, remembering rumors that the King of Heland will stop at nothing to collect his debts. He flinches as the armored king looms over him. Desperately, he begs for just a month or two more time, hoping to escape the immediate situation. The King of Heland considers this, then glances at a trembling, dark-haired woman being held nearby. In a shocking move, he throws the woman forward and coldly asks, "How much for this woman?" He carelessly tosses a stack of money onto a table. The woman looks up in absolute terror, her ordeal just beginning. A scream echoes as the black-haired man erupts in fury, declaring that the woman is his mother. With a powerful thwack, the King of Heland strikes him, calling him "you." The masked king looks down with cold indifference, asking if he looks like he's joking. Grabbing the emperor by the collar, he furiously demands 10 million gold immediately. He lifts the emperor off his feet before the stunned court, warning he'll have to take something else if he isn't paid. The emperor gasps for air, choked by the king's unyielding grip. He desperately pleads for just a little more time. A flashback begins, showing a blonde-haired woman with a bloodied face. The scene transitions to a memory of a peaceful, sunlit day. In the memory, a man's voice lovingly says, "I love you, Maria." In a beautiful garden, Henry swears to all the gods that he will love and protect Maria for the rest of his life as she smiles. Touched by his vow, Maria promises to do her best as his empress and wife, but he just scoffs. With a crash, the memory shatters as he mockingly asks, "Really?" surrounded by fire. Tears stream down Maria's face as she realizes the devastating truth. As fire rages, she understands that Henry and their love were never what they seemed. The vision of her happy past fades into a blood-soaked memory. Her body hits the floor with a thud as the illusion crumbles. A sinister, shadowy figure of Henry with a terrifying grin looms in her mind. Maria lies defeated, realizing he is not just cruel and wicked, but something not even human. Her thoughts drift into darkness, as she wishes he had just killed her instead. Elsewhere, the emperor argues with a dark-haired woman, blaming her for promising a fortune to a concubine and causing their financial ruin. From the side, a young, blonde-haired child overhears the woman retort that his gambling is the true cause of their debt. The child utters a pained "ugh" and collapses as someone calls out, "Your Majesty." A voice asks if Her Majesty has regained consciousness, while another shouts in alarm that Maria is awake. Maria wakes in a grand bed, surrounded by people, as a woman demands to know if she's acquainted with the King of Heland. The dark-haired woman dismisses the question, declaring the real problem is their debt to the King of Heland. Turning on her son, she laments what the savage has done and demands a solution. He calmly states he will speak with Maria. The emperor sits by Maria's bed, gently telling her she's a good girl and that he'll leave the matter to her. A disembodied voice considers the situation, musing that in that case, he'll spare her life for now. The voice grows furious, shouting, "This is infuriating. Say something, Maria." But she remains silent and unresponsive. As a wave of pain washes over Maria, she collapses onto an ornate sofa. Henry rushes to her side in alarm, crying out her name as the dark-haired woman gasps in shock. A cruel voice echoes in Maria's mind, taunting her for being unable to speak, calling her a useless cripple. The scene transitions to an imposing view of the palace under a starry night sky. Inside a lavish room, red curtains hang heavily, setting a tense mood. The view shifts to a muscular leg dripping with water in a bath. The camera pans up to reveal the well-defined torso of the King of Heland as he reaches out. With a troubled expression, the bare-chested, red-haired king runs a wet hand through his long hair, lost in silent thought. Elsewhere, Henry slams his fist on a balcony, railing in frustration, lamenting that Maria could have solved this through diplomacy before she lost her voice. The emperor sits alone on the balcony, defeated and stewing in his powerlessness. Now, at his desk, he's tormented by the thought that the King of Heland will return at dawn to collect his debt. Slumped in despair, Henry wonders how he can possibly find a way to survive while trapped in the palace. He looks up to see the former Empress, Laurent, standing alluringly in the doorway. Laurent smirks, asking if men don't like beautiful women, causing a shocked Henry to call out her name. Grabbing his shirt, she confidently declares there's nothing she can't do. As he questions if she plans to seduce another man, she presses her body against his, leaving him momentarily speechless. Flustered and blushing, Henry stammers her name as she moves closer. A sinister smile crosses Henry's face as he cups her chin, deciding to trust Laurent's negotiation skills to charm the king. Two royal guards stand watch outside a pair of grand, closed doors. A tap sounds as the King of Heland sits alone in his dimly lit room. Laurent enters, carrying a tray of refreshments as she approaches the king near a large indoor pool. With a bottle of spider rage on her tray, she smiles, thinking her task will be easy. As she recalls the guard's nervous warnings, Laurent reflects on how a little charm makes men lose their wits. She approaches the king's side, wondering if even he is susceptible to her charms. Wah! The king suddenly grabs her wrist, his expression a mixture of shock and anger. A single tear falls from his eye as he stares at her with a pained, intense gaze. Stunned, Laurent asks who he is, her mind racing with the rumors of a brutish, disfigured king. She's shocked to find him incredibly handsome and introduces herself as Laurent Siradu. The king coldly rejects her offer of wine, telling her to leave if her business is concluded. As he turns away, Laurent grabs the bottle, desperately offering to drink it herself. He snatches the bottle from her hands before she can take a drink. Laurent looks up, her seductive facade cracking under his intense scrutiny. She desperately pleads with him, asking for just one more year to repay the debt. Promising they can repay the 10 million gold in a year, Laurent makes her case as the king listens impassively. He cruelly comments on an unbearable stench, clarifying it's her smell, not the perfume she's drenched in. Leaning close, he asks why she isn't home feeding her baby, causing her to recoil in tears as he dismisses the timing. He smirks, callously explaining that her drinking could harm the baby she's nursing. With a final verbal jab, he scoffs that she wouldn't know anything about that before a loud bang echoes through the room. An attendant reports to the king that the preparations he ordered are now complete. A blonde-haired maid brings a cup of tea to a despondent Maria, who sits silently in her bed. The maid encourages her to taste the lovely-smelling tea, but Maria remains unresponsive. Looking down with feigned pity, the maid laments the state of the poor Empress. Suddenly remembering something, she excitedly tells Her Majesty to look at what she's brought. The maid presents a beautiful quill pen, identifying it as a gift from Maria's grandfather, Pope Liberio. As Maria takes the glowing pen, a spark of recognition flickers in her vacant eyes. A memory surfaces of her grandfather explaining that the special quill pen can draw anything. The memory continues, warning that while it can create any color, its drawings are permanent and must be used with caution. In a sunlit memory, a young, joyful Maria clutches the precious gift to her heart. The happy memory fades as Maria gasps in pain in the present, clutching at her throat. She cries out as a shadowy figure embraces her, a painful reminder of her past torment. Ah! The maid screams, Your Majesty, as she clutches the convulsing Maria in her arms. With a sudden crash, the maid looks up in alarm from Maria's side. Tap. An armored boot steps firmly into the room. The King of Heland and his men stride into the chamber, where Maria lies collapsed on the floor. The blonde-haired maid stands defiantly, demanding to know how he dares barge into Her Majesty's chambers. A tense moment unfolds as the red-haired, horned king stands before the weakened Maria. Reaching for his horned mask, the king declares he has come to take her with him. He removes his mask, revealing his face as he asks her, "It's been 10 years, hasn't it?" Maria stares back, a flicker of weary recognition in her eyes. A pink-haired woman and the maid look on, confusedly wondering what he means by 10 years. The pink-haired woman's mind races, connecting his tanned skin and red hair to a memory of slave number 44. The maid corrects her, identifying the man as Gunther Plasley. She remembers that the Empress herself gave him that name, just as he moves with a sudden whoosh. Gunther sweeps Maria into his arms as the maid cries out, asking where he's taking Her Majesty. Looking down at the woman in his arms, he gently says her name, Maria. Holding her close, the Horned King intensely tells her to come with him to Heland. His grip remains firm as he reiterates his plea for her to come to Heland. He carries her through a grand, empty hall, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Continuing on, he carries her through a moonlit courtyard. He quietly asks Maria if she is feeling uncomfortable anywhere. Explaining he cannot leave her in this place any longer, he continues walking as the maid calls out to Her Majesty. The maid explains that Her Majesty seems unable to speak from the shock. Gunther pauses his departure, silently processing the maid's words. He gently brushes her hair with his armored hand. With renewed purpose, he takes another step forward. He walks resolutely out of the palace, with Maria still in his arms. As they emerge onto the palace steps, an angry voice demands to know the meaning of this nightly intrusion. Emperor Henry demands to know what Gunther plans to do with Maria, declaring she is a criminal sentenced to be hanged. What? Henry is stunned by the suggestion that the king plans to take Maria as a hostage. Gunther presents an ultimatum. Either Henry comes with him, or he hands over Maria as collateral for the dead. A cruel smirk crosses Henry's face as he realizes the plan is working, though he insists it must be formalized with a document. Gunther assures him, "My word is my promise," Henry Coburg. Henry and his attendants watch with anxious uncertainty as the king stands his ground. Wondering just how valuable Maria is to him, Henry asks how long the deadline will be extended. Gunther replies, 1 year. Henry inwardly scoffs at the short extension, but outwardly agrees to repay the debt in a year to get Maria back. Gunther seals the deal, stating he trusts Henry isn't a fool who would go back on his word. Wah! Suddenly, Maria stirs in his arms as a voice asks if she's finally coming to her senses. Her fingers weakly intertwine with her maid's. Now standing, Maria holds her maid's hands and faintly speaks her title, "My maid." The maid looks at her with tears of relief, responding, "Your Majesty." Maria grips her hand, thinking that at the very least, she needs to save her. Realizing her maid wants to follow, Maria turns to Gunther and says, "Nancy, come with us as well." Maria gently pulls a surprised Nancy forward to join them. Maria stops, her expression hardening with resolve. The two women stand opposite each other in a moment of silent understanding. Tears stream down Nancy's face as she cries out that she can't go with Her Majesty. In a shocking confession, Nancy apologizes, exclaiming that she's pregnant. Maria freezes, turning away from her maid in stunned silence. Turning back, Maria's thoughts race as she questions whose child it could be, knowing Nancy has always been by her side. A happy memory surfaces of them together, as Maria thinks that if Nancy had a lover, she would have surely known. A memory reveals a smirking Henry with Nancy and a baby, as his voice cruelly informs Maria that Nancy is carrying his child. In the memory, Henry's cruel smile widens as he declares Nancy a far better woman for carrying his child. Back in the present, a tearful Nancy collapses, apologizing profusely to Her Majesty and begging for forgiveness. A defiant Maria thinks to herself that love is like that, questioning if her only crime was loving someone. Clutching a blood-stained document, she thinks she just hopes everyone else managed to escape safely. A memory of a smirking blonde boy surfaces as a dark realization dawns, the one who drove her father and mother to their deaths was. The thought is punctuated by a gruesome image of her mother's bloody corpse. With a gasp, the terrible truth hits her as she realizes it was him, her hair beginning to turn a ghostly white. In an instant, Maria's hair transforms completely to a flowing, ethereal white as she stares in utter horror. Henry and Nancy are stunned by her sudden change, crying out in shock as they point to her hair. As Henry reaches for her, Gunther's armored hand swiftly intercepts his. Whoosh! In a flash, Gunther pulls the transformed Maria away from the stunned emperor. Gunther looks down at the white-haired Maria and calmly tells her, "Let's go now." Maria reaches out, her glowing hand touching the king's chestplate. She turns to face a startled Henry, now standing resolutely by the masked king's side. With newfound power, she summons Gunther's massive sword directly into her own hand. Henry looks on, confused by her actions and wondering what she's doing all of a sudden. Mistaking her intent, he smirks and patronizingly agrees to let her say her final goodbyes. Maria grabs his hand, and in a flash of light, she begins writing on his skin with her magical quill pen. Henry cries out in surprise, finally noticing the unique quill in her hand. "Maria? What are you doing?" he yells as she presses the pen against his skin. She finishes her work, leaving a glowing curse written on his hand. "May divine punishment fall upon this ruthless murderer." "You crazy!" Henry screams, trying desperately to wipe the indelible words off his hand, shouting about how she dared defile his body. Consumed by rage, he bellows that her act is unforgivable, and he'll kill her, but an attendant calls his name, Emperor. The masked king coolly asks if there's any other collateral he can offer now. With a single tear of defeat, Henry grimly accepts that their business is concluded. As Gunther leads Maria away, Henry vows to return in 1 year to settle things. Gunther and Maria walk away from the palace under the night sky. Henry clutches his cursed hand, snarling her name in fury as Nancy watches with a pained expression. A close-up reveals the pure hatred burning in Henry's eye. The scene transitions to a wide shot of the dark palace under a full moon. Their journey begins as a carriage travels through a city at dusk. The carriage continues on its path, leaving the city behind. Inside, Maria sits silently across from the imposing, masked King of Heland. The King of Heland watches her, his expression unreadable behind his ornate mask. Maria, now in a dark cloak, notes to herself that he has been staring at her persistently since the journey began. She silently wonders why the King of Heland is so fixated on her. Pondering if it's because she's a valuable hostage, she feels he's overly interested in her personal affairs. The thought crosses her mind had she met this man before, just as a loud thud signals the carriage has stopped. Startled by the sudden stop, she looks towards the window, wondering what's happening. A commotion erupts outside, as a voice shouts, "Kill the traitor, Maria Stuart," leaving her stunned. An angry mob demands they drive out the extravagant Empress who drained the national treasury. Another voice orders Maria Stuart to step down and pay for her sins as a vision of an execution appears. The crowd gossips loudly, accusing her of indulging in luxury with Helen's money and being dragged away for it. A hand holds up a tomato before hurling it at the carriage, yelling her name. The tomato splatters across the window, obscuring Maria's tear-streaked face. Gunther leans in, calmly advising her, "Don't listen to fabricated lies." She reflects on the so-called lies, being branded a witch, a villainess, and a spendthrift. Maria recalls her past, how she was called arrogant and resented, but studied tirelessly to become a worthy empress for her nation, Lastonia. She remembers letting Henry take credit for her achievements, thinking it was fine, but now wonders if all her sacrifice was just for this miserable end. The hateful crowd gossips that she was a witch, couldn't have children, and calls for the extermination of the Stuart family. A vision of her execution flashes, showing her bound and hanging lifelessly. Overwhelmed by the hatred, she covers her face and weeps. Her hand clutches her cloak as she trembles with despair. Tears streaming down her face, she insists it's all lies as the mob surrounds her carriage. The scene transitions to a peaceful, sunlit view of the treetops as the journey continues. Later, inside the carriage, Gunther watches over Maria as she sleeps. He notes her anxious expression and wonders if she finally managed to fall asleep. An attendant on horseback reports that the mountain path is too rough to continue in the dark and suggests making camp. The masked Gunther listens silently to the suggestion. Looking at the sleeping Maria, he decides it's better for her to rest and agrees to camp quietly. The attendant acknowledges the order as the sun sets. Night falls and moonlight streams through the window of their temporary lodging. Maria awakens with a start, wondering when she lost consciousness. She moves to the window, feeling the cold air and trying to figure out where she is. Catching her reflection, she touches her white hair in shock. Looking up at the sky, she despairingly asks God if this is what he wanted her to become. As she collapses in sorrow, a disembodied voice gently calls her name. Maria. In a vision, she sees her mother, who calls her my precious daughter. Startled, she feels a jolt of recognition. Realizing it was her mother's voice, she looks toward the moonlit forest with desperate hope. Following the voice, she runs through the woods, pleading to be taken along. As a voice desperately calls her name, she begs to be taken away from this place. Gunther grabs her arm, telling her to stop, and she turns, recognizing the King of Heland. She warns him not to stop her, insisting her mother is waiting just ahead as she points toward a fiery precipice. Calling her name, Gunther urgently warns her to look at what's ahead of her. Maria stands perilously close to the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around her. Her long white hair flows wildly in the wind. Resigned, she thinks that since everyone dies anyway, she no longer has any reason to live. Stepping forward, she wonders why she should even remain in this world. She reflects that those she loved were either unjustly killed or abandoned her. Overcome with grief, she sees no point in spending the rest of her life suffering. Her hair billows against the night sky as she makes her final decision. Gunther watches in horror, a tear of anguish streaming down his face. He screams her name as she lets herself fall backward over the cliff's edge. As she plummets, she makes a final plea to God. She asks that if he feels even the slightest pity for her, he punish the sinners and make them suffer as she has. Offering her very being, she is ready to be consumed by a pitch-black darkness. Accepting her fate, she thinks that now everything will end, just as a hand reaches for her. Whoosh! In a desperate leap, Gunther dives off the cliff right after her. He manages to grab her by the ankle, halting her descent. Startled, Maria looks up at him as he catches her. He pulls her into his arms, holding her tightly as they fall through the air together. With a thud, he lands safely on a ledge below. Breaking their fall, he gently sets her down on solid ground. Maria realizes he must have run alongside her, watching as he collapses from the effort. He glares up at her, thinking she's insane and asking who gave her permission to die. His expression is a mixture of exhaustion, anger, and desperation. Standing before her, he furiously demands to know who told her she could just choose to die. Clinging to her, Gunther furiously declares that she cannot die. He holds Maria tightly, his face contorted in anguish as he screams, "Never!" On the ledge, Maria wonders how he could have jumped so recklessly, as if her life meant nothing. Clutching his chest in pain, Gunther thinks how she dared to die and leave him behind. Maria stares at him, her thoughts labeling him a savage human. She angrily questions who he is to interfere and what he matters to her. Overcome with emotion, she demands to know why he saved her. "Ah!" she screams, asking why he would drag her back to the reality she tried to escape. As Maria lets out a pained cry, a concerned Gunther calls out her name. Gunther pleads with the struggling Maria to stay with him, worried she will collapse from exhaustion. He produces a small, glowing purple vial from his armor. With a click, he uncorks the vial. He brings the potion to his lips. In a desperate move, he kisses the weakened Maria, passing the potion to her. As tears stream down his face, he holds her close during the kiss. The intimate moment continues under the moonlight. Maria now lies unconscious in his arms in the quiet forest. Gunther gently cradles her still form. He reveals he has lived through 10 years just for her and vows he will not lose her again. 2 of his men find them in the forest, shouting that they've been found. After his attendant notes his sudden disappearance, Gunther decisively announces they are changing course. His men look shocked, asking where they are going. Holding the unconscious Maria, Gunther declares their new destination, the Heland mines. The chapter concludes with a decorative title card. The scene shifts to a sprawling, brightly lit palace at night. A woman in an ornate dress and red heels walks through a grand hall. Henry and Nancy are among those who greet a red-haired woman, addressing her as, "Your Majesty." The red-haired woman points at Nancy, angrily demanding to know who she is. As Henry begins to explain, calling her Laurent, she cuts him off, warning him not to lie. Laurent throws a tantrum, accusing Nancy of being the Emperor's mistress and wailing about how upsetting it is. In a cute flashback, Henry refers to Laurent in the third person, saying he knows his dear Laurent is upset. Laurent demands he get rid of Nancy. When he corrects her, she dismisses it with, "Whatever." Back in the present, Laurent declares that anyone who sided with the deposed Empress is bad luck and must be driven out. Laurent menacingly tells Nancy to get out before she crushes her under her heel. Nancy cries out, as Laurent inwardly notes how quickly she dropped her dim-witted act. Laurent looks down at Nancy, wondering if this cruel side is her true self. Laurent reflects that she and Nancy played a huge role in driving Maria out, and she wonders what it says about her if she discards a traitor so easily. Her aunt advises Laurent to try and understand his majesty, reminding her that Nancy created this opportunity for her. A man's hand grips hers, as a narrator warns that this feeling won't last long. The narration continues, stating Maria will be forgotten, just as a horrifying vision of her appears. In a flashback, Henry presses Nancy for information on Maria's plans, reminding her of her first betrayal. He grabs her collar, praising her for her great service. Henry cups Nancy's face, telling her to hold her head high and not shrink back. Nancy thinks to herself that the most important thing now is her love for His Majesty and his affection for her, though he looks down on her with a cold expression. A narrative caption reveals that now there's no longer any going back for her. The scene changes to a desolate mine, where men toil with carts under a harsh sun. Life at the mines is shown through brief flashes of workers sorting rocks and a hand ringing a bell. A group of faceless miners looks up from their work. A man with blonde hair and a black cloak, identified as Solskjaer, vice captain of Heland, commands the attention of the assembled workers. He announces that he will be revealing the new team assignments, telling everyone to listen carefully. As three women listen, one wonders why the teams are being reorganized again so soon after the last assignment. Solskjaer reads from a list, assigning team members to F-Zone, Nora, Jael, Chloe, and Niram. He then calls out the final name for the team, Maria, as the three women look on in surprise. The workers begin to whisper amongst themselves, asking who Maria is and telling each other to look. A frail woman with long, grayish-green hair appears, and the workers murmur, questioning if she is a noble. The woman stands alone in the center of the room as the other workers stare, one of them commenting on her unusual outfit. Solskjaer watches her with a conflicted expression, letting out a weary sigh. Looking out at the workers, he sternly declares that everyone is equal here. He continues his speech over a vision of barren lands, warning that no one gets special treatment and that troublemakers will be punished or exiled. He orders them to work relentlessly in the Heland mines, promising they will be paid according to their efforts. The workers erupt in cheers for the King of Heland as the scene transitions to a bright, hopeful sky. A few days later, the scene shifts to the bustling Heland mine, where carts sit on wooden tracks. A blonde woman in charge points at the gray-haired woman, ordering her to go stand at the very end of the line. Following the order, the gray-haired woman walks to the back of the line of other female workers. Two women gossip about the newcomer, noting she's been standing silently for days and seems unable to work. Another wonders if the recent team reorganization was because of her. As Maria stands apart from the group, the other women question if the teams were really changed just for her. One of the women leans in to whisper a rumor that the silent woman used to be a noble. The gossip intensifies as they speculate that the king himself brought her, questioning if they have a special relationship while recalling a vision of Gunther holding her. A woman with dark purple hair skeptically asks why a noble would be a laborer instead of at the palace, but no one has an answer. The women consider trying to get on her good side, while the purple-haired woman silently mulls over the possibility that she's a noblewoman. Suddenly, the purple-haired woman, Nora, turns and walks away as her companions call out her name. Her friends hurry to catch up as Nora and the others head off to work. Elsewhere, a hand slams down on a wooden desk with a sharp thud. Solskjaer confronts a seated Gunther, angrily asking if he's satisfied now. He demands to know what Gunther is trying to do by forcing a former empress to work in a mine. Gunther coldly cuts him off, telling him it's enough and asking if he carried out the task as ordered. Visibly distressed, Solskjaer confirms that he followed his orders exactly. Solskjaer reports that he gathered all the troublemakers into one group with Maria as the only new face, earning a terse, good work from a grim-faced Gunther. He desperately asks if Gunther will truly leave Lady Maria there, convinced she will never survive in such a harsh place. Gunther emotionlessly states that he sent her there precisely so that she wouldn't survive, leaving Solskjaer speechless. The sound of small feet pattering nearby catches their attention, and Solskjaer wonders what it could be. An exclamation mark appears as they both turn their gaze toward a slightly open door. A small, elven-eared child named Stone peeks in, happily calling out Gunther's name. Gunther looks over, surprised, and asks Stone why he is there. Solskjaer apologizes, explaining that Sir Stone insisted on seeing him. The child pipes up, telling Gunther not to scold Solskjaer because he had to come. He decides the timing is convenient, as he had something to ask Stone anyway, and suggests they talk. A title card identifies the child as Helen's spirit, Stone. Gunther begins, explaining that he went to Lastonia to get Maria shortly after making a promise to Pope Liberio. He reveals that when he arrived, mercenaries hired by the Emperor's mistress had already massacred the Stuart family and burned their home to the ground. Gunther expresses his regret, wondering if things would have been different had he arrived sooner, and accuses Stone, a spirit of time, of knowing this would happen. Stone calmly places his cup down and simply says, "I told you." He gently reminds Gunther that twisting a predetermined fate is an extremely difficult task. Stone elaborates that even if fate had been defied, a similar disaster would have simply followed. Gunther curses fate under his breath. The child beams and advises Gunther not to hate fate too much. After all, he says, with a bright smile, it was fate that brought the two of them together, which Gunther begrudgingly acknowledges. A flashback begins, with Gunther recalling a time 10 years ago when he was at his weakest. He narrates venturing into the barren northern lands of Heland, remembering how shocked he was by what he discovered there. Gunther's narration reveals he found a newborn baby abandoned in a desolate land where no one lived. He continues, explaining that one day, the child he had taken in suddenly vanished. He recalls how Stone returned, claiming to be the spirit of the land, and used his incredible time-manipulating powers to help him grow strong. But the more Stone used his powers, the more his own body suffered, stunting his growth until he looked like a toddler, even after 10 years. Gunther admits that his judgment was clouded by Maria's situation, causing him to push the already strained Stone too far. In the present, he faces the small, elven-eared child and apologizes for snapping at him. Stone smiles gently, assuring Gunther it's okay before perceptively asking if there's something else on his mind. Gunther realizes with a grim expression that nothing can be hidden from a spirit bound by a contract. Looking into the child's bright green eyes, he softly says his name, Stone. With a tear streaking down his face, Gunther desperately begs Stone to use his power to help him. As they sit opposite each other, Gunther thinks to himself that Stone must find him shameless for asking. He acknowledges that Stone's power is unstable, yet he's still making the request, adding that he wouldn't blame the spirit for breaking their contract. To his surprise, Stone breaks into a wide, happy grin and eagerly agrees. Stone confirms that he only has to help this one time, leaving Gunther momentarily speechless. Visibly moved, Gunther asks if Stone will truly help him, and the child confidently replies, "Of course." A vision of Gunther and Maria appears as Stone explains that just as their meeting was fate, so was the birth of Gunther and Maria. Clenching his fist, Gunther mutters about fate, remembering the promise he made to Pope Liberio to leave the Stuart family and go to the northern lands. In a memory, a younger Gunther stands before Pope Liberio in a dimly lit room. The Pope gestures to an ornate celestial dial, declaring that Gunther's destiny awaits him there, causing Gunther to question his predetermined fate. His thoughts drift to a beautiful memory of him and Maria in a blossoming tree, as he wonders if his only fate is to make her happy. His resolve hardening, Gunther looks at Stone and vows that he'll do anything it takes. Stone readily agrees and asks what he needs to do. With a golden pocket watch floating in the background, Stone tells Gunther to explain, promising to do everything he can. The chapter concludes with a decorative title card in Korean. The scene shifts to Maria, her face somber and weary as she stands in the mine. Looking at a pile of dark rocks, she wonders how to tell which one is gold. She holds up a chunk of ore, thinking that all the rocks look so similar she doesn't know how to classify them. Her thoughts are interrupted as someone calls out, "Come on!" A woman announces that it's lunchtime, warning everyone to hurry before the food is gone. A fellow worker rushes past a motionless Maria, eager to get to the meal. With a bump, the running woman collides with Maria's side. The woman quickly apologizes, calling Maria newbie. An ornate quill pen drops to the dusty ground with a soft thud. Maria's eye widens in recognition as she stares at the fallen pen. She remembers walking away in the desolate mine, the quill pen lying forgotten on the ground. At the mess hall, two women marvel at the bread and meat stew, saying they never ate so well in Lastonia. A voice coldly informs the group that they don't get lunch today. The women are told that if they don't meet their quota, they don't eat, and Maria clutches her empty pouch in despair. An older woman with her arms crossed smugly tells Maria to get back to work if she wants to eat. Maria turns her head, silently questioning the harsh rule. Suddenly, a person with long purple hair and a menacing smile interjects, remarking that this is the first they've heard of such a rule. Maria looks at the beautiful newcomer, but is surprised to hear their voices distinctly masculine. The purple-haired person demands an explanation for the sudden silence, while a hooded woman stammers nervously. Another woman tells the newcomer to stay out of it, adding that they don't want to see Maria's filthy face anyway. The purple-haired person scoffs, calling the women dirty and proclaiming himself the only one shining there, which shocks them. The purple-haired leader continues, declaring that he is the one who makes the law here, as another worker calls out, "Nora!" Maria walks toward the woman who bullied her. In a stunning display of authority, Maria looks down at the woman and tells her if she won't follow her rules, then she should get out. Nora's golden eyes widen in shock at Maria's unexpected command. Maria looks on in quiet confusion. The purple-haired person approaches one of the women, declaring, "I knew it," and calling her Goblin Lady. After threatening to report the woman, the purple-haired person is violently shoved to the ground with a thud. The blonde leader and her friend mock the fallen figure, asking what they're doing and dismissing them as a, quote, filthy pervert. The purple-haired person glares up from the floor, clenching their fist and seething. "You all!" The bullying leader smirks, adding a final, cruel rule. Every zone receives rations only for its assigned members. With a sinister smile, she wonders aloud if any other group will take in the now exiled Erotique and Maria. As the bullies leave, one of the women turns and says, "Yes, Nora," confirming the leader's name. A woman with braided, dirty blonde hair turns away from the scene. Suddenly, someone hands the purple-haired person a loaf of bread, leaving both them and Maria surprised. In a cute chibi thought bubble, the purple-haired person worries they shouldn't be seen right now. Nora's companions look back in shock at the act of kindness, one of them shouting, "You!" The woman grabs Maria's wrist, accusing her of being a sneaky thief, as the purple-haired person urges her to run. The purple-haired person whispers to Maria that they didn't meet their quota either, revealing they are in the same predicament. Enraged, Nora lets out a piercing shriek as a fiery aura erupts around her. Frightened, Maria and the purple-haired person flee as the bullies shout that they won't let them escape. Watching them run, one of Nora's followers anxiously asks their leader what they should do. Nora stares after them with a cold, determined expression, shadows of thorns falling across her face. Later that night, in a dark alley, a sudden burst of force sends someone flying. The purple-haired person crashes to the ground with a cry of pain. Nora and her two followers stand over them, demanding to know what's going on. Beaten and sitting on the cold ground, the purple-haired person realizes with dread that they're being kicked out of the dorm. A wanted poster for Empress Maria is shown, a reminder of her past life. Outside, Nora's group discusses the situation, wondering why the outcasts are choosing to sleep outside. One of the women complains about being bothered all afternoon, concluding that the pair will freeze to death outside. Nora scoffs, saying they should have been prepared for this after failing to meet the quota, calling the purple-haired person a pervert. The purple-haired person grits their teeth, tired of being called a pervert. They throw up their hands in frustration, asking what harm they have possibly caused. Nora grabs them by the collar, accusing them of being a man who is disrupting the group of women. Leaning in close, Nora glares and calls them a filthy pervert. She shoves them away, ordering them to get lost and never return to the women's quarters. Another woman chimes in, warning that no one will open their doors to Maria and Erotique either. As they sit outcast in the cold, Maria suddenly rises and approaches Erotique. Maria's eyes seem to glow with a gentle blue light in the darkness. Placing a comforting hand on Erotique's shoulder, Maria's touch emits a wave of magical energy as Erotique asks, "Why?" The glowing energy spreads across the ground, illuminating the dark forest floor. "Wow!" Erotique exclaims, amazed to discover a hidden, luminous cave they never knew existed. Erotique marvels at the discovery, wondering how Maria found a cave they missed for 2 months. Maria silently gestures, suggesting they use the cave as a shelter whenever they're kicked out, leaving Erotique speechless. Looking at Erotique's stunned face, Maria says their name. Erotique gently asks Maria if she is truly unable to speak. Erotique begins a confession, starting with their first impression of Maria when she arrived. Recalling a vision of Maria looking regal, Erotique admits they thought she was a noble who had gotten lost. With a slight smile, Erotique confesses they expected someone important to come rescue her. Erotique looks away, admitting they plan to use Maria to improve their own situation and offering a heartfelt apology. Maria listens intently to the confession, her expression unreadable. Erotique asks if Maria is confused by the sudden apology. Erotique reflects on the irony of their own materialistic motives, noting that Maria helped them without expecting anything in return. Erotique recalls that Maria's eyes never held judgment or rejection for them. And, most importantly, Erotique adds, her gaze never held any sinister desires. Overwhelmed by her sincerity, Erotique blushes with a gentle smile. With newfound confidence, Erotique formally introduces themselves, asking Maria to just call them Ero from now on. As Maria extends a hand, Ero reflects that she truly wants to be friends, unlike the calculating people outside. The scene transitions to a magnificent imperial city under a bright sun, as an unseen person asks what the other wishes to say. A dark-haired man and a blonde-haired woman sit across from one another in a sunlit, elegant room. The blonde woman thanks His Majesty for his time, stating she has something important to discuss. The Emperor sighs internally, thinking how annoying lowly people become when shown a little kindness, but he simply tells her to proceed. The blonde woman looks at him with resolve, declaring that she wants to be by his side. In a flashback, she reveals her true ambition. She didn't betray Lady Maria just to be a concubine. She's always wanted the position of Empress. She recalls desiring a position of absolute power, something she never could have dreamed of before. Her hands are clasped tightly, a symbol of her unyielding determination. She muses that she holds the perfect chess piece to justify becoming Empress, then asks if His Majesty will welcome her, to which he replies that Maria already gave him a prince. As the blonde woman suggests she could also give birth to a prince, the Emperor turns away, annoyed and questioning her statement. She boldly states her wish to become the Empress, causing the Emperor to slam the table and shout her name, Nancy Ackerman. He furiously questions how a mere peasant girl dares to make such a demand. The Emperor dismisses her words as nonsense, but Nancy pleads for him to listen, revealing the great king of Heland has his eyes on the former Empress. When he scoffs that it's obvious, Nancy cryptically asks, what if the situation runs deeper than he thinks? Puzzled by her insinuation, the Emperor asks what she means. Nancy presses him, questioning if it was really a coincidence that the king of Heland's visit to collect a massive debt coincided perfectly with the former Empress's crisis. With a sly grin, Nancy proposes they use the king of Heland's feelings to their advantage, leaving the Emperor to ponder her words. Nancy reveals her plan, vowing to make it so the Emperor won't have to pay back the 10 million gold, ensuring the Empress relies solely on him. Now intrigued, the Emperor leans in, gently touching Nancy's chin and asking for a more detailed explanation as he orders breakfast to be prepared. The scene shifts to a dark and stormy night in a desolate rocky forest. Huddled in the rain, a sick and shivering Ero lets out a weak groan of pain. Maria worries about the cold, knowing no one will help them, and concluding it's best not to try and seek shelter in the quarters. Startled by a sound from the cave entrance, Maria calls out, "Who's there?" She nervously wonders if it's an animal or a guard, as a mysterious hooded figure appears in the pouring rain. Maria stumbles back in shock as the cloaked stranger steps into their makeshift shelter. The cloaked man walks purposefully deeper into the cave. The man's hood falls back slightly, revealing a determined face and a glowing red clasp on his cloak. A streak of brilliant white light cuts through the oppressive darkness of the cave. The mysterious man now stands before Maria, who looks up weakly and realizes it's a man. As the hooded man surveys the cave, Maria wonders if this was his space to begin with. Clasping her chest in fear, Maria wonders if this stranger is targeting her. As the man takes a step forward, Maria's thoughts race she needs to wake Ero. The hooded man reaches down and takes Maria's hand as Ero lies unconscious nearby. The man gently pulls Maria to her feet, whispering, "Don't wake her," as a magical light surrounds them. Maria looks up at the man, completely stunned into silence. A whoosh of wind blows through the rainy forest. The camera pans across the rain-soaked leaves of the dark forest. The chapter ends with a title card set against the full moon. Inside a small wooden hut, Ero murmurs while sleeping soundly in a bed. Maria stands by the window, looking out at the stormy weather. She thinks to herself that she never knew a hut was located here. Turning to the man who brought them there, she silently wonders who he is. The man stands before her, his hood down, holding what appears to be a swaddled infant. Inside the simple room, the man stands opposite Maria, with Ero resting on one of the two beds. The man tells Maria she would have fallen seriously ill in the cave, and that they should rest here for the night. The two share a quiet, meaningful look in the warm light of the hut. The man introduces himself as a Heland warrior tasked with guarding the mine's borders. Promising to stand watch outside, he tells Maria she can rest easy. With a tear rolling down her cheek, Maria looks on in disbelief, wondering if his kindness is truly real. Maria remains suspicious, thinking that a Heland warrior isn't obligated to help, and his actions could be seen as interference. She gazes at the young man, wondering if Heland warriors truly start working at such a young age. Realizing he looks no older than 16, she's surprised when he excuses himself and walks towards her. Startled by his sudden proximity, Maria's eyes widen as she wonders when he got so close. She mentally scolds herself for letting her guard down just because he's young, as a golden light fills the air. The young warrior stands before her, holding his dark, hooded cloak open in a protective gesture. He gently drapes the cloak over Maria's shoulders, telling her to cover herself to stay warm. His gaze softens as he quickly clarifies he meant for her to use it as a blanket. Announcing his departure, the warrior turns and heads for the door of the small hut. Now wrapped snugly in his cloak, Maria sits on the floor and quietly watches him leave. As the door closes, Maria looks down, a warm blush spreading across her cheeks. She clutches the heavy cloak to her chest, looking flustered by the unexpected act of kindness. Outside, the cloaked warrior stops in the pouring rain, pausing for a moment before continuing on. He stands alone in the downpour, a thoughtful and somber expression on his face. The scene transitions to a bright new day, showing a lush, sunlit forest. A disembodied voice explains the simple task of sorting gold from ordinary stones. Arrow and Maria work side by side, with Arrow smiling as they show Maria a golden nugget they found. An overview of the mine shows the division of labor. Men dig while women sort stones, with pay based on results. A dark-haired woman demonstrates the sorting technique, telling the others to watch closely and follow her lead. Nora and her followers observe from afar, wondering how Maria and Arrow are perfectly fine after being left in the storm. When a follower speculates they got help from the king's quarters, Nora furiously tells her to stop spouting nonsense. Nora leads her group away, declaring they no longer need to go easy on the outcasts. Arrow excitedly tells Maria that because Heland gold is so pure, their wages should be quite good. Just as Arrow declares it's the best job ever, they are suddenly struck on the head. Nora approaches with a cruel smirk, accusing the bastard Arrow of defiling the precious gold. Arrow remains silent, giving Nora a cold, defiant stare. Maria points out to a distracted Arrow that there seems to be an unusually large amount of gold in their pile. In a symbolic moment, Maria takes Arrow's hand and gently asks if they are all right. Arrow puts on a brave face, smiling at Maria and insisting that they're really fine. Maria looks on, reflecting that no matter how much her outward appearance has changed, her soul remains the same. In a parallel moment of self-affirmation, Arrow smiles confidently, declaring internally, "I am always me." An ornate silver crest, part of a decorative frame, is shown in close-up. Watching Arrow's resilience, Maria's eyes fill with admiration as she begins to think how cool they are. She smiles softly, silently impressed by Arrow's unwavering spirit. Back in the moment, Arrow lightheartedly points out a plain rock to Maria while they continue their work. The workday continues at the bustling mining camp under a hazy sky. At the end of the day, Arrow clicks their tongue in annoyance, lamenting that they failed to meet the quota again. Nora clenches her fist, declaring that the pair brought the gods' punishment upon themselves as Arrow is shown stealing again. As another woman questions Nora's self-proclaimed divine authority, Arrow quietly tells Maria to act as a lookout for them. Arrow moves stealthily through the dark, empty camp on their mission to find food. They reach out, their hand hovering over a plate of freshly baked bread. Triumphant, Arrow grabs a loaf, unaware that Nora and her followers are watching from the shadows. Thwack! Someone forcefully slaps the bread from Arrow's grasp. The stolen loaf of bread tumbles through the air, landing in the dirt. Arrow is thrown to the ground with a cry of pain as Nora smirks, having finally caught the thief. Looming over them, Nora taunts the fallen Arrow for trying to steal food. Lying on the ground, a shocked Arrow wonders how they were caught, believing the others were working far away. From a distance, Maria and other workers look on in disbelief at the unfolding scene. Maria stands rigidly, her body radiating a dark purple aura as thorny vines materialize around her. A hand roughly grabs Arrow's wrist as someone shouts, "Get over here, you perverted freak." As Nora gloats that she'll report the theft, Maria rises with a dark aura, threatening to report Nora for tormenting them in return. With a cold glare, Arrow dismisses Maria's empty threat, finding it laughable. Nora counters that everyone witnessed the theft, and mockingly points out that Maria appears perfectly fine, undermining any claim of torment. Defeated, Arrow sits on the ground as Nora's voice taunts them, asking who would believe such a stupid lie. Arrow realizes they walked right into a trap as the sinister, shadowy figures of Nora and her followers loom in their mind. Dragged away, Arrow wonders if Maria escaped, while a blonde woman sneers at their defeated expression. The blonde woman's mockery turns to a gasp of surprise. In a different, watery setting, a woman with flowing bluish-green hair grabs the blonde woman's arm, coldly asking what she thinks she's doing. Swoosh! A brilliant flash of light engulfs the scene. The chapter title appears within an ornate, Gothic frame. A man urgently calls out to His Majesty, running toward a large house to report trouble. Bursting into an office, the man informs a white-haired man at a desk that a huge fight broke out among the female workers, to which he receives a dismissive "and." When the man clarifies that Lady Maria is in the middle of it, the white-haired man's calm demeanor shatters. An ornate, flowery frame marks a transition in the scene. In a comedic thought bubble, the messenger panics that she is going to get beaten to a pulp. The white-haired man, in chibi form, silently questions the phrase, "to a pulp," as the messenger looks on nervously. Smiling decisively, the white-haired man gets up from his desk and summons someone named Solskar to go with him. Solskar, a tall man in heavy armor, follows him out of the room, agreeing to lead the way. Back at the camp, a group of women brutally beats Maria and Arrow on the ground, while others cheer them on. As Maria's hair is pulled, another woman suggests Nora should take off the pervert's pants, an idea Nora seems to relish. Arrow trembles on the ground as Maria glares with pure fury, and a blonde woman watches in sudden shock. The blonde woman cries out in alarm as Nora prepares to humiliate Arrow. Another woman with dark hair looks on with disgust, thinking the blonde woman is just like the rest of the cruel nobles. She reflects bitterly that nobles are no different from common people. Recalling a past trauma of being looked down on by nobles, she seethes with resentment, vowing she can't forgive them. Fueled by rage, she lunges forward to kick Arrow, screaming that this time she'll make them pay. Suddenly, a calm but firm voice commands, "Enough!" stopping the attack. The workers cry out in shock as a regal figure arrives on the scene. The armored king and the white-haired man make their grand entrance. The king silently surveys the chaotic scene of Nora and her followers, standing over the fallen Maria and Arrow. Arrow lies unconscious and vulnerable on the dirty ground. The armored king turns to Nora and demands she explain what happened. Stunned, Nora panics, wondering if the rumors about Maria being the king's woman are true. She scrambles for an excuse, deciding to claim that her target stole bread first. From behind the king, a blonde woman stands ready to speak in Nora's defense. The blonde woman boldly states that Nora was simply punishing them for breaking the rules and stealing bread. She insists that punishing rule breakers is only natural as the king and his companions listen. The white-haired man declares that Erotique and Maria of Section F will both be punished for causing a disturbance, shocking Nora. The armored king delivers the sentence, ordering the two of them to be tied to the lumber rack for the night. As Maria and Erotique lie beaten on the floor, the king decrees they won't be permitted a single drop of water until sunrise. Against a bright blue sky, a voice confirms the order has been understood. The scene transitions to a vast, sun-drenched canyon. Under the stars, Maria and Erotique are tied back-to-back to a large tree. In a cute, chibi-style inner monologue, Maria notes how Erotique went from screaming to sleeping, calling them worthless trash. Her thoughts soften as she considers that falling asleep might be a mercy, given their hunger and pain. Maria looks down, her expression filled with sorrow and exhaustion. She looks up at the night sky, comparing herself to him and feeling a sense of shame. Bathed in moonlight, Maria reflects on how utterly pathetic she has become. In a series of ornate frames, Maria's inner voice mocks her fall from grace, an empress reduced to stealing bread and being tied to a post. She reflects on her past ignorance, realizing she never knew what the raw gold she spent so freely looked like, or that Helen's gold was especially pure. Her memories drift to a time of luxury, admitting she never once considered how her vast wealth was even refined. Pulled back to her grim reality, Maria hangs her head in shame, thinking about how pathetic she feels. A rustle in the nearby bushes breaks the silence of the night. Startled by the sound, Maria's eyes widen in alarm. To her surprise, Arrow emerges from the foliage holding a small bowl, causing her to think, "That kid." End of quote. Arrow quietly approaches and stands before the bound and weary Maria. Maria stares back with a hardened, distrustful expression, remaining silent. In a cute chibi thought, she stubbornly decides she won't eat what Arrow is offering. Arrow gently insists that she must eat, reminding her that she hasn't had a proper meal since yesterday. Suspicious, Maria questions why this boy is helping her, reasoning that he couldn't want anything from her and had ample opportunity to harm her before. Her paranoia deepens as she wonders if this is just a trap by the king of Heland to make her his puppet. An image of the imposing, armored king looms in her mind, representing her deepest fear. Resigning herself to the situation, Maria acknowledges that she can't deny the king's desire for her as she stares blankly at Arrow. She takes a breath, her expression hardening as she prepares to refuse the offer. "I said I'm not eating it," she snaps, angrily pushing back against Arrow's kindness. With a look of genuine pain, Arrow simply pleads with her. A beautifully illustrated moment captures the emotional tension between the two. Desperate, Arrow begs Maria to at least drink something. She's taken aback, wondering how Arrow knows her name, but another thought quickly takes precedence. Maria questions internally if Arrow's concern and identity could all be an act. As Arrow blushes intensely, she comically thinks to herself that she's never seen someone in love blush so hard. A close-up shows Arrow's flushed face, unable to meet her gaze. Maria observes him, a faint blush on her own cheeks as she considers his reaction. Arrow gently offers the bowl again, asking if she will drink. Gulp. Maria finally relents, taking a sip from the bowl he holds for her. She remains silent, her gaze lowered as she drinks. A relieved Arrow softly asks if she would like some more. Maria wordlessly grabs the bowl herself to continue drinking. The two share an intimate moment, their faces close as they both hold on to the bowl. As she drinks, she looks up into his eyes. A single tear escapes her eye, revealing her raw vulnerability. Arrow stares back at her, his face flushed with powerful emotion. His emerald eyes sparkle with an unspoken feeling. Overwhelmed by the moment, Arrow is shown blushing deeply, surrounded by a floral aura. Maria worries she made him uncomfortable, but Arrow simply stands and announces that he must return to his post. As he explains he's been away too long, Maria watches him with a complex expression. With a parting, "See you next time," he turns to leave her and the other unconscious prisoner. He quickly disappears, running back into the darkness of the forest. Maria watches the spot where he vanished, her thoughts drifting. Arrow runs off into a stylized, floral background. Maria's mind drifts back in time, a memory beginning to surface. She recalls seeing that very same back walking away from her long ago, a scene that now feels deeply familiar. In a flashback, a younger Arrow walks alone through a moonlit forest. Sensing a presence, Arrow stops and firmly commands the hidden figures to show themselves. Two young boys emerge from the bushes. A startled, white-haired boy with a harp wonders what the sound was as Arrow watches them coolly. The brown-haired boy urgently calls out to the white-haired boy, addressing him as "Your Majesty." A chibi thought bubble reveals Arrow's inner thoughts, wondering why Solskjaer is there with Stone. Another thought bubble explains that Solskjaer had followed His Majesty, Stone, out of curiosity. A blushing Arrow furiously denies flirting with the lady, as his companion apologizes for the misunderstanding. In a comedic cutaway, the white-haired man reasons that since His Majesty hasn't dated in 25 years, he was clearly the one being flirted with. The white-haired man offers to teach Arrow about women, but Arrow, holding a small boy named Stan, rejects the offer, calling him a womanizer. As the white-haired man champions living life to the fullest, Arrow warns the young Stan not to listen to him. The white-haired man decides to leave the trash behind and walks away, much to Arrow's annoyance. Stopping, the white-haired man turns and seriously addresses Arrow as "Your Majesty." He then asks Arrow if Lady Maria showed any reaction to his presence. Through a close-up of Arrow's eye, the white-haired man speculates that Arrow used his form from 10 years ago to trigger her memory. The white-haired man acknowledges the risk to Maria, but believes recreating the past is worth it, calling out to Arrow as Solskjaer. With a swoosh, the white-haired man departs, moving swiftly through the forest. Holding the sleeping child, Arrow regrets his earlier outburst, refocusing on his true priority, awakening Maria's heart. Arrow reveals he borrowed Stan's power to assume his current form because Maria is in a fragile state, putting her needs before his own desires. His companion's voice echoes, questioning what will happen if Maria never remembers or understands his feelings. The white-haired man smiles confidently, dismissing the question as a pointless worry. He asserts that Maria's core essence can never truly be changed, as the scene flashes back to her tied to the post. A memory of a confident, green-eyed man with brown hair smiling warmly amidst a field of flowers. He simply states that some things are just the way they are. A golden eye widens in surprise, a brief flash of an unknown person's reaction. Back in the present, the white-haired man urges Arrow to hurry, reminding him that sunrise is approaching. The white-haired man watches Arrow walk ahead, his gaze filled with quiet resolve. He smirks, reflecting on the feeling of being irrevocably devoted to a single person as a magical seal glows in the night sky. An unseen companion's voice complains in disbelief as the white-haired man walks away, leaving him behind. The scene transitions from the dark forest to a sun-bleached, rocky canyon. Inside a bustling mine, workers labor amidst piles of dark ore. An exhausted Maria clutches her throat, admitting that she is starving. She laments that it has been 2 days since her last meal, anxiously wondering if she'll get to eat today. Suddenly, a voice calls her name, and she looks up with a startled expression. Arrow, now disguised with dark purple hair, tells Maria he is going to work on another side, leaving her confused. He points to a different pile, claiming there's more gold there and instructing her to continue working where she is. Arrow cheerfully promises to swap bags with her later, but Maria insists it isn't necessary as he waves and runs off. Maria watches him go, realizing with a pang of emotion that he must be just as hungry as she is. Overwhelmed by his kindness, a single tear escapes her eye. Her mind drifts, showing hazy, dreamlike memories of the past within the mine. A vision of a small, green-eyed child with elven ears points determinedly towards something unseen. Maria gasps, startled by the brief vision, and wondering if she is seeing things. She dismisses the thought, reasoning there is no way a child could be in the mine. The other workers continue their labor, completely unaware of the strange occurrence. The scene shifts between a fleeting memory and workers exchanging goods. A group of workers, including a smirking man, inspect a sack presumably filled with gold. A distorted, eerie image of Maria flashes, hinting at her troubled state of mind. An explanation reveals that Ira used Stan's power to alter his age, showing his younger disguise and a taller, more powerful form. The scene returns to the trio of workers coveting the bag of gold. The distorted image of Maria appears once more, emphasizing her internal turmoil. Iro confronts a woman, demanding his gold back, but she laughs in his face and asks why she should give it up. The woman cruelly taunts him, saying the gold is better off with them than a pervert, as a concerned Maria looks on. Watching the confrontation, someone's hand clenches in anger, thinking the bullies have gone too far. Maria realizes Arrow is weak from hunger and fumes, wondering why they are bullying him so relentlessly. The onlooking crowd callously cheers the bullies on. As the crowd eggs them on to crush him, Maria watches in horror, questioning if anyone sees how unjust this is. With a look of grim determination, Maria decides that this injustice cannot continue. Clutching the sack of food, Maria stands alone and wonders what she is supposed to do now. She reflects on her current state, acknowledging that she has no wealth or fame to her name. She continues her lament, realizing she also lacks the power to convince anyone of the truth. Looking over the other workers in the mine, she questions what a powerless person like her can even do. The scene shifts, focusing on the desolate, thorny branches of a dead tree. A close-up reveals Maria's determined expression as an idea begins to form. Her eyes lock onto a sturdy tree branch as she thinks to herself, "This, maybe." A decorative title card marks a transition in the story. Ugh! Arrow is violently knocked to the ground by a sudden blow. A brown-haired woman named Nora stands over him, declaring it's time to settle things with the sick freak. Pinning Arrow down, Nora gloats that, since everyone knows he's alone, there is no one left to stop them. From a distance, a woman turns in shock, calling out a warning. "No, Nora." Holding a glowing branch, Maria steps forward, wondering why the woman is suddenly calling her name. Nora smirks, mockingly asking if Maria really intends to fight her with a simple stick. Maria stands her ground, ready for a confrontation. Nora offers a deal. She'll fight barehanded, and if Maria wins, they'll leave Arrow alone for good. The crowd buzzes with excitement as a fight is announced. with everyone betting on Nora to win. Nora's companion sneers, promising they will teach Maria a lesson she won't forget. Watching from the side, Arrow worries that Maria is too weak from starvation to fight properly. He concludes that the match is already decided as the two women charge at each other. Whack! Maria lands a solid hit on Nora's head with her branch. Arrow watches in pained disbelief at the unexpected blow. Maria stares at the branch in her hand, surprised by her own strength. Nora easily dodges Maria's clumsy kicks, noting her opponent is full of openings. Having served its purpose, the branch falls to the ground. Filled with a surge of confidence, Maria declares internally that she can win this fight. The onlookers are stunned by Maria's swift movements, likening it to noble swordplay, as Arrow whispers her name in awe. Nora stumbles back, grunting in pain as her friends call her name, but she clenches her fist, refusing to accept defeat. Maria realizes, with a jolt, that they never actually set any rules for the fight. A sinister grin spreads across Nora's face as she ponders how to decide the winner. "Let's keep going until one of us surrenders," Nora shouts, throwing a handful of dirt into Maria's eyes. Nora takes advantage of the opening, brutally kicking the blinded Maria. One of the onlookers points out Nora's dirty tactic of throwing sand as her friend watches in dismay. Another bystander calls it a cheap trick as Nora pins the incapacitated Maria to the ground. Maria grimaces in pain, overpowered and defeated. The scene transitions to a quiet building under a tranquil, starry sky. Inside a dark stone dungeon, Maria is seen alone in a cell. Light from a barred window illuminates the unconscious Maria lying on the cold floor. As punishment, Nora's gang is tied to a post while Maria is imprisoned, in order to reflect on her actions. Waking up in the dungeon, Maria looks toward the moonlight and scoffs at the idea of reflecting on her wrongdoing. She defiantly asserts that standing up for Arrow and fighting back against a bully were not wrong actions. She grits her teeth, filled with righteous indignation. Overwhelmed by helplessness, Maria slumps against the dungeon wall. A sudden realization dawns on her as she wonders when she became so pragmatic and grounded in reality. Lying on the floor, a troubling thought begins to surface in her mind. A close-up shows her bruised hand resting on her chest. Elsewhere, a gloved hand presses down on an ornate royal seal. A stern-looking man with brown hair sits alone in a lavishly decorated room, his expression grim. The scene shifts to an exterior view of a grand palace illuminated by the night. The man sighs wearily, staring into an ornate teacup as he sits in the dimly lit room. As a man and woman sit together, she asks Your Majesty if he is feeling unwell while he stares down, lost in thought. The purple-eyed woman dismisses his concern, calmly sipping her tea and stating that nothing could possibly make her uncomfortable. She apologizes for misjudging his relationship with Miss Nancy, but he brushes it off, reminding her that Laurent is the one who bore the imperial heir. He poses a question. What would she think if someone offered to clear their debt to Heland? She agrees it would be wonderful, but is shocked he would bring it up. He reveals that Nancy told him Pope Liberto secretly left a private inheritance for Maria's grandfather, and she has promised to help them seize the treasure. The woman correctly deduces that Nancy is aiming for the Empress's seat in exchange for her help, which the man confirms. She seethes with rage, clenching her teeth at the audacity of a lowly serf. The woman urges His Majesty not to be deceived, certain that that girl could not orchestrate such a plan, but he says he felt the same until he heard Nancy's explanation. He reveals that Nancy's explanation was about the King of Heland. A vision of a dark-haired man holding a light-haired woman appears as he explains that the king is utterly infatuated with Maria. He continues, reminding his companion of how the king treated Maria and insisted on taking her as a hostage. With a sigh, the man laments being deceived for 10 years, having believed Maria was involved with a mere slave. As the woman gasps in surprise, he declares that they can turn this situation into a strategy. With a sinister grin, he outlines his plan to have Maria sign over her inheritance and then sell her to the King of Heland for 10 million gold. Overjoyed by the prospect, the woman tearfully exclaims that if it's possible, there's nothing more she could wish for. Ha! She then wonders how they will persuade Maria, given her deep resentment, and the man agrees that this is precisely why they still need Nancy. He explains that for some reason, Maria has always viewed Nancy as a sister. Their plan is for Nancy to exploit this bond by sending a manipulative letter, hoping an apology will sway Maria's foolish sentimentality. HMPH. The woman agrees, laughing at how easily swayed Maria is by her emotions despite her cold appearance. A maid interrupts, noting their tea has grown cold and offering to bring a fresh pot for His Majesty. As the man agrees, a monstrous, shadowy hand appears behind the unsuspecting maid. The scene shifts as a solitary figure walks through a grand, empty hall. A close-up shows a hand secretly passing an ornate green brooch to another. Two maids attend to a pink-haired woman, fastening the gifted brooch to her dress. The pink-haired woman gasps as the brooch is secured at her collar. Now adorned with the new jewel, she is escorted down the hall by one of her maids. A woman named Laurent fumes, realizing the former Empress is the reason for the delay in her own coronation, remembering a time he declared his love only for her. In a memory, the man holds Laurent close, but she internally scoffs at his declaration of love, calling it a joke. Floating in a void of rage, Laurent furiously questions how he dares to weigh her against a petty thing like Nancy. The scene transitions with a burst of power. Flanked by her maids, Laurent storms down a darkened corridor. She stands resolutely before a massive, ornate door. Her hand trembles as she reaches for the door, hesitating for a moment. Taking a breath, she tells herself to calm down and think clearly. A new plan forms as she realizes she can use Maria's inheritance for herself, mocking Henry's foolishness for thinking Maria would ever be swayed by him. A sly smile spreads across her face as she focuses on the idea of Maria's hidden fortune. Her scheme expands to include blaming the King of Heland for failing to protect his hostage and getting rid of the useless Nancy. She wonders why she should bother with a complicated plan when an easier path is available, unaware two maids are listening outside her door. Her shadow is cast on the wall, twisted in a fit of manic laughter. With a wicked expression, Laurent decides she must immediately send a letter to her father in Rondes. The scene transitions from the grand palace to a quiet, moonlit garden. A gust of wind blows past a lone figure with long, light blue hair, sitting in a dark, desolate room. The person reflects on being a man without conscience, questioning what right he has to crave food. Recalling the unspoken pain in others' eyes, he acknowledges their suffering, but resolves that despite it all, something must be done. Filled with determination, he declares he can't just sit and cry, he must bring them justice. HRKK, clutching his chest in anguish, he cries out that he doesn't want to die like this. He rises to his feet, defiantly shouting that he hasn't finished anything yet. The focus shifts to the barred door of his prison cell. A guard appears outside the cell, ordering the prisoner to come forth. A blonde woman, flanked by two guards, walks with purpose down a stone corridor. Her boots clack on the floor as she steps into the unknown. As Maria stands before a large wooden door flanked by a knight and another man, a voice commands her to enter. A man informs the somber, eye-patched Maria that His Majesty is waiting for her. The door creaks open, revealing a blindingly bright light from within. A man with reddish-brown hair appears in the doorway, his voice advising that if she's made up her mind, she shouldn't hesitate. With a bead of sweat on her temple, Maria's expression hardens with resolve. The narration announces a pivotal moment. This is a new beginning for Maria Stuart. The scene closes on the imposing wooden doors, marking her entry into a new life. The scene shifts to reveal an opulent, warmly lit chamber. Maria enters a lavish room to find a man with reddish-brown hair seated alone at a grand feast. A close-up shows Maria's tired and mournful expression, her bandaged eye a stark reminder of her recent past. The man at the table notes she likely hasn't eaten and offers her the entire spread of food and wine. Maria listens as the man's offer continues with a dark condition. He cruelly dictates that she must sit on his lap to be fed, questioning if a hostage like her has any value beyond her looks. Now wearing an ornate mask, the king smiles and invites her to come sit with him. The masked king condescendingly asks if the former Empress of Lastonia has any particular tastes he can satisfy. He steps forward and firmly takes Maria's hand. The king pulls her close, their faces just inches apart. A low hum fills the air as the king gazes at her from behind his mask. Defiantly, Maria picks up a glass of wine herself. After she takes a drink, the king's demeanor shifts, a dark aura enveloping him as he angrily questions her indulgence. The king suddenly falls to his knees before Maria, clutching his head in apparent pain. A single tear escapes the king's eye from behind his mask. Shocking him, Maria leans down and pulls him into a passionate kiss, causing him to gasp. Ugh, the king cries into her embrace as she holds him tightly. Stunned into silence, the king feels her hand gently caressing his face. Huh. Maria shoves him away, and he looks up with a sinister smile, asking why she's acting this way. Wiping her mouth, Maria listens as the king reminds her that she is only his hostage. He lays out his terms. She must stay by his side, accept his gifts, and pretend to fall for him, even if it's just an act. In a vision, a determined Maria is surrounded by thorns as the king declares her performance will make her worth 10 million gold. The masked king turns away, coldly stating that if she understands, it's time to head to bed. As he declares that's all she's expected to do, Maria remains silent, her expression unreadable. Maria finally speaks, questioning what he means and asserting he can't possibly understand her position kneeling before him. Her face is a mask of quiet defiance and sorrow. Aha, the king sneers, accusing her of feigning loyalty to a slave-turned-king only to run away when he's bored. He taunts her for looking offended, but Maria calmly refutes him, stating she will never do what he wants. The two lock gazes, a silent battle of wills passing between them. The king stands over a kneeling Maria, the power dynamic starkly clear. He offers her a chance to escape Heland by proving her abilities are still intact. He gives her 1 week to earn the miners' trust and become their leader, promising to reconsider their relationship if she succeeds. But if she fails, he warns, he will make her his property, his finger glowing with a threatening light. As he walks away, he tells her he hopes she understands the terms of his challenge. He dismisses her for the night, telling her to get some sleep as he won't bother her further. Maria watches him leave, but the king pauses, smirking as he says he hopes today's kiss won't be their last. He licks his lips, admitting a surprising fondness for those raised with elegance. Speechless, Maria can only stare back with a look of veiled contempt. The king reassures her not to be cautious, promising he won't bother her for a week, leaving her utterly alone in the vast room. Maria collapses in exhaustion, but a system window appears confirming her acceptance. All right. In her mind, Maria breathes a sigh of relief, proud that she steered the outcome in her favor without speaking her true plan. Left alone, Maria sits silently, contemplating the daunting task ahead. A golden, ethereal light fills the air, signaling a shift in time and memory. A blonde woman sits alone, her expression filled with sorrow and confusion as a crowned bird rests near her fallen crown. Rain pours down on a desolate, rocky landscape, setting a grim and somber mood. In the downpour, 2 figures huddle on the ground near a cart, while a third stands over them. A man with a long, dark braid embraces someone, wondering aloud how things came to this. Surrounded by an illusion of flowers, a desperate thought echoes. How did things end up like this? A man with white hair holds the dark-braided woman, offering comfort in a quiet embrace. The white-haired man holds her close, internally questioning how their lives took this turn. A flashback begins, taking the story back 30 minutes to a camp on cracked, dry earth. A dark-haired friend offers a bowl of food to Maria, urging her to eat after her time in the dungeon. The friend continues to worry, remarking on how skinny Maria looks as others eat around them. Maria internally recalls that she actually ate a full meal and slept warmly in the king's chambers the previous night. In a cute thought bubble, Maria decides she can't tell her friend the truth, worried she'll just eat the food herself. The friend mentions that Maria received some help the day before. She explains that people thought Nora was unfair, so they declared Maria the real winner and gave her food to share. Overwhelmed by her friend's praise, Maria clutches her head as she's called truly amazing. Maria realizes that earning the people's support is the task the king gave her to become the district leader. A vision of Maria lying on the ground, her long hair fanned out, flashes through her mind. Snapping back to reality, Maria sits up in bed, looking around the unfamiliar room in confusion. She realizes the great king gave her his bedroom while he slept in the study next door. Her thoughts drift to the past, remembering a time when she was in a much worse state. A sudden sound makes her wonder if she just heard her name, and she fumbles with her spoon. Clatter. The spoon drops to the floor as she sits frozen at the table. Memory surfaces of a voice, telling her to use a fork and knife, not her hands, to eat. Clutching her head, she struggles to place the memory, wondering who she was talking to. Frustrated, she stands, unable to remember anything more from that moment. A man with white hair and a dark cape enters the dining hall, and Maria looks up from her meal. The others greet the lieutenant, but he says he has something to discuss with Erotik, who looks up, surprised. Erotique points to herself, confused that the lieutenant wants to speak with her. The white-haired lieutenant pulls her aside, insisting that what he's about to say must remain a secret. He compliments her quick agreement and begins to explain something he believes she may have already guessed. He reveals Lady Maria is the king's woman, clarifying it's a one-sided crush, which leaves Erotique in utter shock. As Erotique loudly dismisses it as a silly rumor, the lieutenant covers her mouth, warning her to be quiet. Erotique interrupts him, demanding to know why the king would send the woman he likes to the mines. She spirals, questioning the king's actions, while the lieutenant begs her to calm down, admitting he doesn't fully understand His Majesty's intentions either. The lieutenant firmly states that everything the king is doing is for Maria's sake, which only confuses Erotique more. He finally gets to his point, asking Erotique if she could assist Lady Maria. He asks her to stay by Maria's side and report anything that happens, as the mine's rules prevent his direct involvement. Explaining that her help would ease his and the king's minds, he notes that Maria seems far too unstable on her own. He stands silently with Erotique, reflecting that he needs to make his own preparations to support the king's plans. He feels guilty for using the child, but resolves that he has no choice for the sake of His Majesty and Lady Maria. As he considers finding someone else, Erotique speaks up, saying he's the first person to ever ask her for a favor. She thinks to herself that he is seriously trusting her, while everyone else has only insulted and ignored her. Looking up at him with shining eyes, she is deeply moved by his faith in her. Erotique suddenly grabs the lieutenant's shoulders, beaming as she declares him a truly good person, startling him. She enthusiastically accepts the task, promising to handle it for her friend Maria, leaving the lieutenant speechless. Elsewhere, two women complain about the worsening rain, doubting they'll be able to work. Others in the dining hall echo the sentiment, unsure if the afternoon shift will even begin. The narration observes that while older workers are idle, the younger women, like Erotique and her friend, remain focused on their tasks. A woman resolves that to become leader of the entire zone, she must first become the leader of Zone H. She concludes she must either drive Nora's group out or earn their trust as others eat together. A man calls for slim, tall female workers for the second mine, clarifying it's not for gold mining when questioned. Grinning, he reveals they found a mana stone in a crack too narrow for men, offering to split the profits. He excitedly hypes up the value of mana stones, but the women below are skeptical about the claim. The man dismisses their doubts and asks for volunteers, as Maria internally calls the situation ridiculous. The lore panel explains that a mana stone is a raw gem only sorcerers can handle unless it's purified. An ominous text explains the danger if an unknowing civilian touches an unrefined mana stone. The dormant magic within could go berserk, which is why sorcerers are usually found in mana stone mines. The narrator deduces that since this is a gold mine, they are likely being careless to avoid paying a sorcerer. Frustrated, the man pleads for a volunteer, insisting the task won't take long. Maria steps forward, raising her hand to volunteer for the dangerous task. Her friend looks on worriedly, asking if Maria is really going as Maria stares ahead with resolve. A history lesson reveals that Maria's grandfather is Pope Liberio, the chosen one of the god Either. Maria recalls her grandfather calming a sorcerer's rampant magic, suspecting the find might not be a mana stone. She resolves that if it is a real stone, her inherited divine power should be enough to handle it. The man agrees Maria is a perfect fit and then calls on a weak-looking, purple-haired person to join. As the man declares it settled, an unseen voice announces that they are coming too. Nora and her friends step forward to join the expedition, confronting Maria. Maria looks on with a steady, determined gaze, acknowledging her rival's presence. A world-building note explains priests lose their family names and cannot use their powers for personal gain. A small group ventures through a dense, rainy forest on their way to the mine. Seeing Nora's group following, Maria's companions wonder what trouble they're planning this time. Maria glances back at her followers, visibly annoyed by their presence in the rain. The rain pours down on the rocky terrain leading to their destination. A decorative title card marks a transition in the story. Arriving at the cave, one of the women questions why so many people were brought along. One man complains about the smaller profit share, while another whispers that something might go wrong. In a whispered plan, the men agree to blame the women if they get caught, thus protecting themselves. Two figures stand together in the rain before the scene transitions to the dark cave mouth. The two men admit they can't identify the stone from a distance and will have to retrieve it to know for sure. They fantasize that if it's a mid-grade stone, they could afford houses in the capital of Lastonia. A blonde woman scoffs at their ambitions and impatiently asks when they'll start, citing their lunch break. Annoyed, the man tells the women to go stand watch at the entrance while they begin. The man turns to Maria and the purple-haired person, asking which of them will retrieve the stone. The purple-haired person volunteers to go, telling Maria to wait, but she looks worried. Confused by his sudden decision, Maria asks him what he's planning to do. Her companions worry aloud, questioning if they can trust the men, since Lord Solskjaer hasn't been informed. One friend encourages Maria, trusting her strange insights and pushing her to try, noting Solskjaer is arrow. Agreeing to go, Maria reasons that since valuable magic stones are rare, the risk is likely low. She walks toward the stone, believing the chance of a dangerous reaction from a simple touch is minimal. A reassuring voice tells Maria Stuart not to be scared as her hand reaches toward the glowing crevice. Her finger gently makes contact with the bright, pulsating magic stone. A powerful energy erupts from the stone, enveloping Maria in a brilliant, shocking light. A flash of a divine-looking woman appears as crackling energy surges through the cave. Boom! The entire cave begins to shake violently, throwing everyone off balance. As the ground trembles, someone cries out in panic, asking if it's an earthquake. The cave ceiling crumbles as rocks and dust rain down on the terrified group. Boom! Mid the collapse, Eero desperately screams Maria's name. Meanwhile, inside a cabin office, a long-haired man sits in quiet contemplation, unaware of the disaster outside. The man with long, reddish-brown hair reflects that Maria seemed sane again, just as she was 10 years ago. He correctly guesses that she must have found a new purpose in life. Sitting alone in his study, he laments that he is not the reason for her renewed will to live. He smiles, vowing that as long as Maria wants to live again, he will make sure she can, sighing "Ha!" with renewed determination. In a vision, he gazes down at a glowing figure, resolving to gladly accept her contempt. Damn it! He swears he will become a villain if it means he can stand by her side instead of Henry. Caressing her hair and his thoughts, he vows to love her more than his rival ever could, then scolds himself for being out of his mind. A blonde-haired man bursts in, urgently calling for His Majesty, and reporting a terrible incident involving Lady Maria. The king reacts in shock as the scene shifts to Maria, who looks devastated and wonders why this is happening so suddenly. A single tear falls from Maria's eye as she looks downward in sorrow. As Maria awakens on the ground, the purple-haired arrow leans over her, expressing his relief that she's conscious. Dazed amidst the rubble, Maria asks what happened, and Eero explains a sudden landslide hit while offering to help her up. Trapped within the collapsed cave, a man explains they must take shelter deeper inside for now. The blonde woman, Nora, furiously blames the men for making them work on a rainy day. One of the men retorts sarcastically, reminding her that she happily went along when promised money. Another person panics, shouting that they were told nothing would happen and now someone is injured. While one person calls out to Nora, Maria looks on in frustration, telling them it's been over an hour and asking if they aren't sick of arguing. Maria wonders where the magic stone is, hoping a mid-grade one could be used to treat the injuries. As a hand reaches for a dull gray rock, Maria turns to her companion and asks about it. The purple-haired person explains it was just ore, not a magic stone, and asks if it looks like a regular rock to her too. In another place, a man with long, light blue hair lies down in despair, muttering that he can't believe it. A lore panel explains the color-coded grading system for magic stones, from pale blue low-grade to brilliant red top-grade. Back in the cave, Maria blames herself, confessing she knew it was dangerous, but wanted to prove she could succeed on her own. Overcome with guilt, she sobs that it's all her fault, but her companion urges her to come up with a plan instead. Nora confronts Maria about the lack of food, while one of the men shouts that he's had enough of the nonsense. The man yells back that arguing won't solve their hunger, as Eero quietly approaches from behind the group. The arguers turn and snap at Eero, who simply thinks that he only said one thing. Eero calmly states he brought supplies, explaining he was worried because his friend wasn't eating well. He holds up a bag filled with food, explaining he grabbed leftovers from the dining hall earlier. The scene shifts to the pouring rain outside, where lightning flashes as men frantically work at the cave-in site. Standing in the storm, the king commands his men to use a machine to dig through the debris. He orders them to hurry as a subordinate rushes to his side with a report. The subordinate warns that the rain is worsening and the machinery will soon be unusable. But the king is dismissive. He recalls a hooded figure holding a woman in the rain, remembering being told about a stone and his lover's inability to leave him. The hooded blonde man explains his magic can only move small rocks, which is not enough to clear the landslide. Understanding the limitations, the king orders Solskjaer to have the machines removed, surprising his subordinate. With no other option, the king declares he will dig through the soil and stones himself. His men rush to bring tools and offer assistance as he urges everyone to move faster. As the hooded man laments their crude methods, the woman beside him shouts for everyone to be careful and avoid any further damage. Damn it! The king falls to his knees, beginning to dig through the mud with his bare hands. As he claws desperately at the earth and the torrential rain, he thinks that this desperate struggle is not what he wanted. An ornate title card marks a transition in the story. Inside the cave, Nora snatches the bag of food from Arrow, accusing him of trying to keep it all for himself. With his back turned, Arrow scoffs, telling her not to make him laugh. A member of Nora's group confronts Arrow, demanding to know what he's doing. As Maria begins digging with a shovel, Nora's group accuses her of causing trouble and planning to eat selfishly. Maria grabs Arrow's arm, telling him to stop, and he looks back with a sigh. Arrow smiles at Maria and says that he understands her. Confused, the others ask what's happening, and Maria explains Arrow meant for the food to be shared, telling her own group not to fight. Her companions quickly agree they must help each other, but Nora's group seems hesitant, telling them to wait. One of Maria's companions looks on angrily, wondering why Nora's group is being so cruel about the food. A member of Nora's group retorts that they were going to share, but scolds them for not even saying thank you. A quiet apology is offered as someone lets go of their pride. A man from Nora's group fully apologizes for their selfish behavior in the dire situation and offers to share their food as well. Maria and her friends look on as the hostility finally begins to fade. The blonde woman from Nora's group closes her eyes, filled with shame and regret. Smiling, one of Maria's companions accepts the apology and says she's sorry too. The announcement is made that it's okay, and the entire group sits together to share a meal at last. While one man wonders if they'll ever get out, a woman asks Nora why she isn't eating. Maria sits quietly, reassuring herself that rescuers know where they are and will come for them. One of the men gets Arrow's attention, confirming that he wants to speak to him specifically. The man admits Arrow's name is beautiful before pointedly asking why he pretends to be a woman. Arrow remains silent, looking away from the deeply personal question. He explains that he was originally assigned to the men's side, but they complained about him being a burden. Arrow recounts his tragic past. Born near the Demon Kingdom, his 3 brothers died in war, forcing his parents to disguise him as a girl to save his life. A flashback shows a young Arrow, his expression somber with the weight of his secret. He recalls how his parents would punish him harshly if he failed to dress and act like a girl. After living as a girl for so long, the persona became natural, prompting the man to ask why he's suffering alone here instead of with his parents. The man presses further, asking why Arrow is enduring this hardship all alone. Arrow's story turns darker as he recalls enemy soldiers raiding his home. His father urged him to escape just before they broke in. In a tearful memory, young Arrow refuses to leave his father, who calmly tells him he's just going first. His father's last words echo through the flames, telling his son to stay safe and wait for them. He promised they would meet again in the kingdom of Heland as he walked away to face the enemy. Arrow reflects that it was the first time his father called him a son, a final, desperate act of love. Back in the present, Arrow confesses that he no longer knows which version of himself is the real one. He explains he keeps his female appearance because his parents wouldn't recognize him as a son, hoping they might one day find him this way. The entire group, having overheard, cries out in sympathy, exclaiming, "You poor thing!" Arrow teak. In a wave of chaotic support, the group curses his enemies, offers to take responsibility, and tells him to keep cross-dressing because it suits him. As one woman expresses her pity, Arrow dryly thinks that he tried to talk to them before, but they just ignored him. The narrator explains that everyone at the mine has a painful story, showing a rare, happy memory of Arrow being hugged. Shifting focus, the narration suggests the same tragic past applies to Maria, who looks up in surprise. With a sudden tremor, Maria instinctively shoves 2 of Nora's friends out of harm's way. The 2 women look back in horror as thorny vines erupt from the ground. and one screams Nora's name. Nora lies unconscious on the ground, having taken the brunt of the mysterious attack. A mournful thought wonders if things would have been different if they had never met like this. A small, decorative character appears, marking a brief pause in the story. The scene lingers on Nora, still motionless and injured on the cave floor. The others rush toward Nora in a panic, crying out her name as she lies unresponsive. One of the men gently holds Nora as a woman leans in, frantically asking if she's in pain from the wound. Nora's blonde friend stands defensively, warning the man holding Nora not to even think about taking revenge. The two women stand guard, watching the man with open suspicion. The silver-haired man simply looks down at the unconscious Nora in his arms, his expression unreadable. Outside in the storm, the rescue crew grows frantic, demanding to know if the shaman has arrived yet. The torrential rain continues as someone observes the weather is too strange, explaining the shaman's delay. As night falls, the rescuers express their frustration, lamenting that they were almost finished with the cleanup. The men stare at the massive boulder blocking the cave, wondering how it got there and why workers were inside during lunch. While the other workers have given up from exhaustion, the king continues digging non-stop, prompting a small hooded figure to ask if he should be stopped. A brilliant surge of magic cuts through the rain as someone with piercing green eyes prepares to act. A brief memory of a hooded man holding a child in the rain surfaces as the king keeps digging with his bloodied hands. The scene fades into a dark, splattered screen, signifying a grim turn of events. A woman with silver gray hair gently asks the dark-haired Maria if she's feeling any better. Looking toward Nora, Maria expresses her worry, mentioning how pale Nora looked and sighing that there is still no news from outside. Nora, looking relieved, thinks to herself that her collapse was just dehydration, as she had suspected. A flashback monologue explains that Nora's dehydration was due to earlier blood loss and that she was treated with fruit juice from Arrow. The blonde woman approaches Nora, asking why she's being so quiet. As two of Nora's companions blame Maria for the collapse, Maria steps in and firmly tells them to stop. The man angrily confronts Maria, revealing he overheard a lieutenant identify her as a noble from Lastonia, their enemy nation. The revelation spreads, with one person declaring Maria their enemy, while another questions if she was the specific noble who tormented them. The group sits in tense silence as someone hesitantly agrees that Maria wasn't their direct tormentor, but remains conflicted. Nora breaks the silence, addressing Maria directly and confirming that she knows she's from Lastonia. In a surprising confession, Nora reveals to her shocked friends that she too was once from Lastonia. Nora begins to share her tragic past, explaining she was a farmer's wife under a cruel lord who one day arrived with armed knights. In a painful memory, Nora's husband despairs over a sudden, impossible tax increase demanded by their lord. Nora recounts how her husband was brutally killed for trying to reason with the lord, who then threatened to sell their children into slavery. A small, decorative character marks a brief pause in Nora's story. Nora concludes her tale, explaining she came to the mine to earn the money the lord demanded, prompting one of the men to curse all nobles. Inspired by Nora's story, others share their own tragedies of cruel nobles burning homes and selling family members. The silver-haired woman laments how nobles turn their suffering into entertainment, finding the cruelty hard to even believe. In a moment of self-reproach, a man with dark hair confesses it was his fault for believing false promises and blindly accepting nobles' reports. Defending Maria, one of her companions shouts that she wasn't the one who tormented them. She redirects the blame, urging them to be angry with the royal family and nobles who corrupted Lastonia. Maria rejects the defense, insisting she must take responsibility, but a hand reaches out and gently takes hers. The silver-haired man confesses to Maria that upon learning her identity, he'd sworn to make her suffer as he did. He admits that looking at her was an unbearable reminder of Lastonia's pain. He finishes by admitting he would have acted differently if he knew her situation and thanks her for breaking his prejudice. Overcome with remorse, the silver-haired man falls to his knees and tearfully apologizes to Maria. He explains that he tried to make her repay a debt in a way that could never bring true resolution. As a hand takes his, Maria reassures him that while one apology can't change the past, she knows his is sincere. Nora also offers an apology, and another man declares it's fine, suggesting they all try to get along from now on. Visibly moved, Maria thinks to herself with renewed hope about what she'll do if they get out of the cave. Nora tells Maria that she is relinquishing her leadership position, showing the still bleeding wound on her arm. Suddenly, Nora collapses to the ground again, as the others cry out her name in alarm. Rushing to Nora's side, they see her wound has taken on a strange color, and one of her friends runs for help. The man from Nora's group desperately pounds on the rubble, blocking the cave entrance, shouting for help. He continues to scream that someone is injured, as a quick flashback shows Nora had been pushing through dizziness the whole time. As someone checks her wrist, they discover that Nora's pulse is weakening rapidly. Cradling the fading Nora, the blonde woman reminds her of the children she needs to get back to. The blonde woman desperately pleads with Nora not to give up, her voice choked with emotion. A sudden, brilliant flash of magical light erupts in the dark cave. The silver-haired woman holds a glowing, purple magic stone, channeling its energy to save Nora. The scene transitions to a magnificent castle bathed in sunlight, surrounded by blooming cherry blossom trees. Sunlight streams through the large window of a grand library filled with books. In a flashback, a blonde female tutor begins a lesson on the history of magic stones and sorcerers for two young boys. The reddish-haired boy dismissively questions when they would ever need to use sorcery. His blonde companion chides him, insisting it's too early to make such a claim. The tutor explains that sorcery is the reason the Hyperion Empire grew so powerful, and that most of its nobles are sorcerers. She elaborates that many Hyperion nobles are powerful individuals capable of using high-level magic. The tutor laments that while their own country enjoys sorcery's benefits, they treat sorcerers with contempt due to stubborn prejudice. As a young blonde girl deems the country bound for ruin, the reddish-haired boy vows that when he becomes Empress, he'll change everything. The reddish-haired boy smirks with cynical amusement, questioning his companion's noble sentiment. With determined strides, a dark-haired man walks away from a sunlit parlor. Maria calls out in surprise, asking where he is suddenly going. A flashback shows the bare-chested king, Gunther, in the rain as he recalls leaving without listening to Maria's words. He remembers her voice fading as a sense of helplessness began to haunt him. In a dark and thorny place, Gunther stands surrounded by ghostly hands, clutching a staff. Back in the storm, a man warns that another landslide is coming, and they must evacuate immediately. An attendant addresses Gunther as, "Your Majesty," but the king furiously orders him to leave. Gunther grits his teeth, determined to handle the disaster by himself. The ground gives way as a massive landslide crashes down in the torrential rain. Maria's voice screams Gunther's name as a man is told Lord Solskar must evacuate. A bloody hand reaches out in the chaos. Wreathed in dark power, Gunther vows that if he could see her again, he would live without regrets. He prays for escape and her safety, promising to be kind and never hurt her again as a crack appears in the darkness. A brilliant flash of light erupts with a powerful surge. The blinding light catches everyone by surprise, engulfing the scene. A voice from the crowd cries out in shock, wondering about the source of the overwhelming light. Fleeting images flash by, showing moments of magical energy and conflict. The survivors look up in awe as a white-haired Maria levitates above them, surrounded by a powerful magical aura. As Maria unleashes her power, her hair glowing in ethereal blue-green, a stunned Gunther whispers her name. A decorative title card marks a transition in the story. The scene shifts to the gentle sound of waves on a serene sandy shore. The view pans over a beautiful seaside villa, highlighting a fine shoe and an ornate butterfly sword. A gentle breeze rustles through tall grass under a golden sky. A woman with wavy, light-colored hair awakens on the beach, confused about where she is and recalling the Stuart villa should have been confiscated. The comforting memory of a specific stew made with meat, mushrooms, and tomatoes comes to mind. She remembers her mother cooking it herself to create cherished childhood memories. In a sunny courtyard, a man and a woman sit together at a small table. A woman with long, wavy hair watches them from a distance, asking her companion if she thinks Maria is all right. A blonde man reassures his companion, Emma, that the Pope promised Maria was left with someone reliable, but Emma remains unconvinced. Emma fears the worst, believing that Maria must think they are all dead. In a horrifying vision, a decaying version of Maria struggles to speak, trying to let someone know she is there. "Look at me," she screams in silent desperation, insisting that she is right there with them. Realizing she can't speak, she reaches out helplessly toward the distant figures on the terrace. She gasps, clutching her chest as she jolts awake in a darkened room. Her hand reaches out into the darkness as she begins to comprehend her surroundings. She recognizes her location, the king's bedroom. As she sits up, she realizes the traumatic experience was just a dream. Her eyes open to find the masked king sitting by her bedside, while Erotine rests unconscious in a bed nearby. With the dark-haired woman also at her side, Maria sits up and wonders why the King of Heland is with her. She and the king exchange a long, silent gaze across the dimly lit room. Maria looks down at a small, dark stone she's holding in her hand. She recalls grabbing the stone on instinct and feeling a powerful force enter her, remembering nothing after as she questions if it's a magic stone. She notes its unusually ordinary and colorless appearance, doubting it's a magic stone at all, while the masked king hums in thought. She sits bolt upright in bed, startled by her sudden recollection. Maria stares intently at the king, her mind racing with unanswered questions. She reflects that the king is truly an enigma, tormenting her one moment and helping her from the shadows the next. The king places a hand over his heart, a silent, unreadable gesture. She muses that while she doesn't understand him, she can sense his obsession and suspects they may have met before. She questions if this past connection is the reason he wants something from her. Her thoughts drift to her lost memories from when she was 13. Looking at the masked man, she wonders if their paths crossed during her childhood. In a dimly lit bedroom, Maria sits up, startled by the man standing beside her bed. Her heart pounds as she realizes with a jolt that his mask is loose. The masked man calmly touches the edge of his mask, thinking it's only a little loose. Believing it looks uncomfortable, Maria reaches out, intending to remove it for him. His hand shoots out, stopping hers as he commands her not to. Stunned by his sharp refusal, she can only stare up at him in shock. As she hesitates, her fingers just inches from his face, she wonders what to do. The tense moment stretches as her hand hovers near his mask. He firmly grabs her wrist, repeating his demand for her to stop. Speechless, Maria looks on, her mind racing. A memory flashes in her mind, a young, sharp-eyed boy with pointed ears. A title card elegantly displays Empress Maria. Maria recognizes the face from her memory, realizing he was the child who saved her at the mines. A small boy greets her as Maria, asking if she remembers him, but she is struck by how much he resembles the boy from her past. As she wonders if this is the boy's younger brother, he introduces himself as Stone, the spirit of Heland. Stone denies being the boy from her memory, and Maria is shocked to realize he just read her mind. An awkward silence hangs between them in the candlelit room. Maria quickly composes herself and offers a formal curtsy, greeting the noble being of eternity. Stone smiles, telling her to relax as such formality isn't needed here. She is astonished to hear his voice speaking directly inside her head. Sensing his overwhelming spiritual power, she asks why a spirit is here, and he reveals the king is his contractor. Maria is surprised to learn that the king has a contract with a spirit. Stone then declares he has come to meet his new contractor, Maria Stewart. Stunned, Maria addresses the spirit, admitting she is not wise enough to understand his intentions. A narration explains that spirits vanished 200 years ago, and humans erased that history to cope with their loss. Maria quietly states that she holds no blame for the spirits. Stone laments that humans erased their precious history of coexistence in a moment of passion. Because of this, Maria knows little about spirits and asks why he chose her and what a contract would entail. Her thoughts race as she wonders if this contract will grant her the power of Helen's great king. She glances between the imposing, masked king and the small spirit. Fifth, a sudden, stifled laugh breaks the serious atmosphere. A goofy, imagined scene shows a tiny, horned stone looking up at a giant, goddess-like Maria. Maria tilts her head in confusion at the strange vision, snapping back to reality. Stone apologizes with a sheepish smile. He explains that her question reminded him of a memory of someone else saying the same thing. However, he clarifies that her situation is the opposite, leaving Maria puzzled. Surrounded by a golden magical sigil, Stone reveals he is not currently a complete spirit. He explains he needs a contract with a guardian of pure soul to borrow their strength, grow, and become complete. Stone adds that while he has lent some power to the king, his majesty grew strong primarily through his own efforts. Maria remains silent, contemplating his explanation. Stone observes her reaction, noting that she seems disappointed. To begin their potential partnership, he offers to teach her a spell, surprising her. He asks her to show him the soul stone that's been following her, and she flinches. Startled, he knows. With a knowing smile, Stone confirms her unspoken thought. The object she found was indeed a soul stone. A vision appears of a woman with long, green hair holding the glowing stone. The scene shifts as a massive crystal floats in a cosmic expanse, transitioning to the Lastonia Imperial Palace. Inside, a man named Heland schemes, asking if killing the deposed Empress will grant them all her money. He questions the reliability of the information, and his sister assures him it is correct. The woman explains her investigation revealed the Empress's largest assets were under a different name, so they were missed during the seizure of House Stuart's property. She reflects on the deposed Empress's cleverness in notarizing a document to protect her assets in the event of death or divorce. The document states that should anything happen to her, all property would revert to its original owner, Pope Liberio. The brown-haired woman, Laurent, scoffs at Maria's cleverness, while Elaine warns that the risk is too great, since their opponents are Heland warriors. Heland continues, voicing his concern that even the famous Serradu family will need to be fully prepared to deal with the barbarian's monstrous strength. Laurent cuts him off, telling him to stop beating around the bush and demanding an advance payment. Heland specifies his price, demanding 5 million gold up front from Laurent. Laurent counters, offering only 2.5 million. When Elaine angrily questions her, she coolly suggests he's the one who doesn't understand. A purple-haired woman silently considers an alternative, wondering if they could get 5 million gold by ransoming Empress Erratique from Gunther Plasley. Laurent lays out her sinister plan: kidnap the Empress, force her to transfer the documents, collect a ransom from Gunther, and then kill her as painfully as possible. She concludes her scheme, revealing they will frame Nancy Ackman as Maria's murderer. Elaine agrees to leave for Heland immediately but smirks, wondering aloud what grudge his dear sister holds against that woman. Laurent ignores his question, ordering him to bring back undeniable proof of Maria's death. Staring intently through a thorny archway, she gives him a final, chilling warning not to be the one to block her path. Back at the table, Elaine relents, agreeing to leave as soon as he gets the money. Thump! Laurent tosses a heavy pouch on the table, which Elaine catches with a sneer, remarking on how the Empire's citizens starve with empty pockets. He mockingly adds that he's relieved his sister's pockets are so heavy, earning an annoyed glance from Laurent. With a final, cheerful goodbye to his dear sister, Elaine departs. Left alone, Laurent quietly contemplates his words about the starving citizens of the Empire. She turns and walks away, instructing a nearby maid to prepare her bath. As her jewels are laid out, Laurent muses about seeing His Majesty and needing a new dress for an upcoming banquet. With cold resolve, she decides she will have to ask Henry to raise taxes on nobles and commoners alike. Her footsteps echo as she walks through the darkened room, her mind set on her goals. A promotional image marks a transition in the story. The scene shifts to a peaceful, remote village built into the side of a sunlit cliff. A few men sit together in the village, sharing a meal under the warm sun. The focus turns to Maria, who looks down at her own hands in confusion and frustration. Sigh. A woman approaches Maria, who is slumped in defeat, and asks if her attempt at sorcery is still not working. Maria reflects on her failure, believing she should know how to use sorcery after watching it countless times. A flashback reveals a woman with long, wavy hair and a younger woman discussing a soul magic stone, which the former confirms is not just a fairy tale. The younger woman excitedly wonders about the legendary stone's abilities and how it differs from top-grade magic stones. In a cute chibi interlude, she apologizes for getting too excited, and the green-haired woman tells her it's fine. In the memory, the boy stone presents a red gem, explaining that this magic stone chooses its own master. He demonstrates its power, explaining that while it looks empty, it resonates with its master and changes properties as the stone in his hand begins to glow. The green-haired woman watches in awe as the stone emits a brilliant, powerful light. A surge of golden, magical energy explodes outwards. Back in the present, a man sits up, his severe wound now completely healed, leaving the onlookers to wonder how it's possible. Maria stares in shock, a bead of sweat on her face, realizing she was the one who performed the miraculous healing. A narration explains that healing power is a divine blessing tied to one's nature, while those without it must rely on complex spell formulas. The now healed man, shirtless and stunned, wonders how she could cast such powerful magic so simply. In a flashback, the boy stone eagerly asks the green-haired woman to teach him sorcery. He vows to work hard to become an excellent sorcerer, but she tells him his natural talent is already sufficient. The green-haired woman looks down at her hand in surprise, wondering aloud if she truly has a talent for sorcery. She admits that she can't remember how she did it and doesn't understand the method at all. Stone reveals the secret. The soul magic stone amplifies its master's power by about 20 times. He holds the glowing stone out to her, explaining that everything depends on her heart. The green-haired woman looks at her hand, tears in her eyes as she finally understands the meaning behind the previous day's events. Wah! Suddenly, a villager's excited cry of Lady Maria breaks the silence, framed by a pink heart. Maria and her companion look confused, with Maria wondering if she misheard her own name. A crowd of villagers swarms them, excitedly retelling exaggerated tales of her heroism and begging to watch her practice sorcery. Overwhelmed by the sudden attention, Maria's companion looks panicked while an annoyed Maria demands to know what's going on. A cute graphic shows the healed man and other villagers giving Maria a big thumbs up, their new hero. A woman with brown hair panics, telling her companions not to believe it and to disperse as more people are coming. TSK. A woman with long brown hair crosses her arms, asking her companions why they're questioning someone who can't even speak. Two men flee in terror from the goblin-like woman, wondering why she isn't resting from her injuries and deciding to run away from her evil energy as she asks if she needs to supervise their work. Two women watch from behind as the three frightened men flee in the distance. A woman with light green hair approaches another with reddish-brown hair, asking what she's doing since her lunch break is almost over. The long-haired, brown-haired woman stands confidently between her two companions, a blonde woman and a shorter, brown-haired woman. The woman with light green hair turns to her companion, asking why she has such a dumbfounded look on her face. The woman with long brown hair turns away with a determined look, stating they won't know if other guys find it first. The woman with light green hair and the one with reddish-brown hair exchange worried glances. The scene shifts to a large estate at sunset, as a woman with dark hair tied up stretches and declares how refreshing it feels. The woman, erotique, decides she should go take a nap and happily runs off. She is suddenly startled by something off-panel, her expression turning to one of surprise. She trips, stumbling forward in a panic. Ouch! Erotique falls, landing directly on top of a man with white hair lying in the grass. Stunned, Erotic recognizes the man as Lord Solskjaer, who looks up and says her name. Lord Solskjaer explains with a cute blush that he was just trying to play a little prank. Her purple eyes widen as she lets out a confused, "What?" "Jump!" Erotique quickly stands up, flustered, and asks Lord Solskjaer what brings him here. Lord Solskjaer thanks her and asks if she could ask Lady Maria out for him tonight, as he came to borrow her. Erotique considers his strange request, thinking that asking Maria out tonight might be difficult. She explains that Maria must be tired from yesterday's events, and, since she's not adapting well to the mine, should rest in the log cabin. Erotique deduces that Lord Solskjaer must have been somewhere other than the mine, and he confirms he was out on business. With a bright, knowing smile, Erotique asks him how he knew. A vision shows Maria standing before a group of miners, as a voice declares her the mining god who controls all of Heland. Large gold crystals glitter in the mine as a voice exclaims in awe at the sheer amount of gold. A hand grips a piece of gold as someone wonders what on earth is happening in their section of the mine. Diagrams illustrate gold pouring out from everywhere Maria points. Wow, the miners cheer and celebrate their incredible find. Maria looks on as the miners happily fill a cart with glistening gold bars. Maria humbly claims she only helped with her small abilities. But another voice questions if this could truly be called a small ability. A chibi Erotique realizes she was completely fooled, while a chibi Maria playfully denies fooling her. The scene transitions to a quiet room, sunlight streaming through a large window. Now dressed in fine clothes, Maria reports that they earned an incredible 10 million gold in just 1 week. The masked king smiles, attributing their success to her contract with Stone. The king points out that Maria also benefited from the arrangement, questioning why she's complaining about not working, which Maria mentally denies ever happened. The king clarifies that he only used Stone's ability once a year, with the rest of the riches found through his and his warriors' efforts. Stone claims his resonance with Maria is simply better, denying he helped her specifically, while the king questions the extreme difference in the help provided. The king declares that Maria won their bet, proving herself by increasing the mine's profits and earning her leadership position, and now it is his turn to keep his promise. The masked king looks down at Maria with a serious, determined expression. He pulls a surprised Maria into a close, intimate embrace under a warm, golden light. The scene shifts to the log cabin under a beautiful, starry night sky. Maria stands alone in the moonlight, wearing an elegant, flowing gown. She reflects on the connection she made at the mine and how her friend Nora regained her health. She recalls the new friends who now worry about her, remembering a moment of shared panic with Erotic. Maria firms her resolve, telling herself this isn't the time to dwell on past connections. Looking towards the grand palace of Heland, she decides that tomorrow she will depart with the great king. Not because she is being forced, but by her own will. Stone stands in a golden hall, announcing that Maria wishes to follow the great king to the royal palace. He explains to the king and Maria that she believes going to the palace might be able to help him somehow. The masked king looks down at a stunned Maria, stating he has no intention of granting her request to follow him. With a confident smirk, the king reveals that taking her to the palace was always his plan, and his visit to the mine was merely a whim. The king takes her hand, explaining she will come to the palace as scheduled and must now tell him what she truly wants from him. Maria looks away, troubled, as the king leans in and promises to give her anything she desires. He moves closer to a blushing Maria, whispering that he'll be waiting for her answer. The scene shifts to a moonlit forest as Maria is identified as the great king of Heland, while a hand clutches a sparkling object. Maria reflects on the king's dual nature, both rough and gentle, and wonders which version is real, concluding with a firm no. Standing alone with her hands clasped, she admits to herself that she doesn't even know who he is as a person. Her thoughts darken as she acknowledges his existence is very useful for her desperate revenge against the one who burned her soul. With fiery determination, she vows to use Gunther Blazely for her revenge. The scene transitions to the dark, moonlit woods where Maria stands alone. A cloaked figure emerges from the woods, calling out to Lady Maria as she looks up in surprise. The hooded man says he heard she is leaving tomorrow and asks if she is feeling unwell, but she remains silent. He explains he came because he has one last thing to give her, telling her to please take it. He presents a beautiful, ornate blue feather quill, asking if it's her belonging. The hooded man explains he found it while patrolling the mine and figured it must belong to her. He smiles warmly at her, gently telling her not to lose it again. He gazes at her softly and whispers her name. Holding the quill, Maria turns away, resolving that she has already decided not to be weak. She stares at the quill, wondering why fate always seems to appear in such unexpected ways. The hooded man pulls her into a sudden, close embrace. Maria closes her eyes, allowing herself this moment of vulnerability for today only. The ornate quill is held aloft against a golden backdrop as she decides to behave herself on her last day. The scene shifts to a peaceful countryside estate as someone off-panel shouts in shock, "What?" Erotique proudly confirms to a blonde woman that she is, of course, going to the palace with Lady Maria. Erotique boasts that she is Maria's only true friend, but Maria skeptically asks if she or Lord Stone ever said she could come. Nora makes her appearance, her name called out with hope. The blonde woman expresses her relief, certain Nora will be much more helpful for palace life, causing a defeated Erotique to cry, "Ugh!" Nora formally asks Maria to take her as a maid, stating she owes her a debt and can be of great help, to which Maria smiles gently. In a field of flowers, a blindfolded red-haired woman in armor is hailed as Your Majesty. The red-haired woman smiles and extends her hand, invitingly telling someone to come with her. Maria, now dressed in a red cloak, specifies their destination is the Heland Royal Palace. A horse-drawn carriage makes its way through a sun-dappled forest. Inside the carriage, Maria looks out the window with a curious, "Oh?" Stone, sitting across from Maria and Nora, asks if she's finally awake. In a cute interlude, Stone proudly shows off a red plaid scarf with little flowers that he knitted himself. Maria gazes out the sunlit window, quietly hoping Solskjaer will like the scarf. As Stone blushes while holding the scarf, a narrator observes that love has begun to blossom. In a close-up of her eye, Maria begins a silent prayer. She finishes her thought, wishing that Stone's love, at least, turns out well, as she gives him a supportive thumbs up. A narration expresses hope that the place they are heading to will be peaceful. Two ornate carriages travel up a green, sunlit hill. The carriages approach the grand, sun-drenched gate of a castle, adorned with red banners. Maria watches from the carriage window as they arrive at their destination. Outside, a crowd of citizens cheers enthusiastically under a shower of confetti. The scene widens to show the entire central city of the Heland kingdom, where the people celebrate the great king's return. From inside the carriage, Maria looks out at the bustling city, noting they arrived in just 1 week. Nora looks out the window in awe at the capital, while Stone eagerly says he wants to see it too. As the crowd waves and welcomes them, a narration explains that everyone is celebrating the great king's return. A final thought concludes that he must be a king, deeply trusted by his people. A woman is jostled awake from a troubled sleep during a rough ride. A horse-drawn carriage bounces along an unpaved, dusty road. A narrator notes the poor condition of the streets, which are full of dirt and rocks. The commentary continues, criticizing the inadequate sewage system and its stagnant water puddles. Observing the haggard-looking people, Maria reflects that the nation is still under construction, having only been founded 40 years ago. She looks at the grand castles, questioning the decision to build such magnificent structures amidst the poverty. Clenching her fist, she resolves that there must be proper order to everything. Nearby, a purple-haired woman smirks knowingly at her companion. The purple-haired woman thinks to herself that Maria seems to be angry. The scene shifts to a long-haired, armored man and his blonde-haired attendant walking through a sunlit hall. An ornate emblem officially welcomes the safe return of His Majesty. The king and his companions are formally greeted on the grand steps of a magnificent white palace. The camera lingers on a gleaming golden horse statue, highlighting the kingdom's opulence. As they walk through a lavish hall, one of the companions wonders if the palace is made entirely of precious metals and gems. The purple-haired woman remarks to an unimpressed Maria that the Heland kingdom must be incredibly rich. Maria, looking weary, dismisses the wealth and decides to go directly to her office. The king instructs an attendant to guide his guests to the hot springs to recover from their journey. He then orders his attendant, Solskjaer, to take Stone to the spirit's room before reporting to his office, but Maria mentally protests. In her thoughts, she pleads for the sleeping, hooded Mr. Stone to wake up, as she has something to say to the king. As the group is led away, Maria's voice calls out again for Mr. Stone. The king continues walking away, seemingly ignoring her plea. Maria's thoughts race as she urgently tries to think of a way to stop him. Suddenly, her female companions surround her, gushing over her doll-like appearance and eagerly pulling her along. Elsewhere on a balcony, a woman warns Arrow he'll pay for any damages, flashing back to a dark memory of 2 shadowy figures. The scene transitions, showing a sunlit, ornate balcony. A hand gently scoops water, signaling a shift to the baths. In the hot springs, a brown-haired woman laughs while Maria sits beside her, looking deeply unhappy. The brown-haired woman sighs in pleasure, amazed at the constant hot water and commenting on the kingdom's immense wealth. Turning her attention elsewhere, she begins to ask a question. She asks Arrow if he intends to keep squatting in the corner for over an hour. Crouching alone, Arrow dismisses the king as only being good to Maria and resentfully mutters about these ladies. The purple-haired woman argues that if the king truly cared for Maria, he would have brought her to the palace to live in luxury long ago. She then descends into a panicked, nonsensical rant about not touching a statue lest they be turned to stone, insisting it's the truth. A decorative panel with pomegranates marks a brief pause in the story. The scene shows a red-haired, hooded person sleeping peacefully against a tree. The sleeper rests within the roots of a massive tree, while in his office the masked king asks if Stone has entered dormancy. Solskjaer reports that Stone is only sleeping temporarily after using his power, and will awaken in half a day, which the king accepts. The king begins to write, dipping his quill into an inkwell. He pauses his writing and looks silently at Solskjaer. Solskjaer explains that for Maria to be treated well by the court, she must be seen as the king's woman, and the king agrees. A sinister smile crosses the king's face as he gives his consent, saying, "Do so." Crash! A man bursts into the room, shouting for Lord Solskjaer. The king scolds him for not knocking, but the man urgently insists His Majesty must come to the hot springs immediately. The king remains seated, his work interrupted by the sudden chaos. Back at the hot springs, a murmuring crowd looks on at a disturbance. The group looks shocked, and the king's eyes widen as someone gasps his name. Nora's blonde friend furiously grabs Eero by the collar, calling him a damn pervert. Iro looks horrified as she accuses him of trying to get away with stealing women's underwear. The scene fades into a dark, gritty texture, signaling a grim turn. The title card for the story is displayed against an ornate floral background. A woman furiously accuses a dark-haired person of being a pervert, as a flashback begins from 10 minutes earlier showing a masked king and his attendant. The blonde attendant playfully asks if the king wanted to join Lady Maria in the bath, but the king insists he only wants to have a meal with her. HMPH, the masked king, dismisses his attendant's teasing, telling him to hurry and see Maria before asking to be excused for the day. The king strides down a grand sunlit corridor toward two waiting handmaidens. He approaches the handmaidens, greeting them and asking if Maria is inside the baths, which they confirm. The king gives an order to the handmaidens, asking them to tell Maria he would like to have a meal with her. As if on cue, a dark-haired person in women's clothing emerges from the baths with Maria and another woman, looking surprised. The dark-haired person, with their arm linked through Maria's, cheekily asks the king if he has come to see Maria at this late hour. Back! The king erupts in rage, violently grabbing the dark-haired person and demanding to know why they were in the hot springs with the women. The dark-haired person frantically denies any wrongdoing, swearing they only waited at the entrance and never looked at Maria improperly. Thick of you to call that an excuse, the king snarls, refusing to accept the explanation. Enraged, the king questions how the man could fail to understand the situation and threatens to banish him from the palace. Maria steps between them to defend her friend, calling out his name, E-T-U-E. Looking the king directly in the eye, Maria firmly declares, "Erotique is my friend." The king questions why she's protecting the pathetic man after enduring another man being by her side, but Erotique begs her not to fight because of him. A flashback reveals the source of the conflict: handmaidens discovering women's underwear inside Erotique's bag. The handmaidens furiously report to the king, calling Erotique a cross-dressing pervert who should be fed to the pigs. In the flashback, a handmaiden claims she saw the man dressed as a woman peeping on them bathing before stealing their underwear. Erotique looks utterly horrified and lost as the false accusations are laid against him. The crowd clamors for justice, demanding to know what happened, and calling for Erotique's immediate banishment and punishment. While Maria dismisses the accusations as nonsense, Erotique sobs helplessly, and a handmaiden complains to the king about the insult. The king sighs and delivers his judgment: lock Erotique in the dungeon without food or water until the truth is revealed, delighting the handmaidens. Maria watches in silence, her expression unreadable, as a tense, thorny atmosphere settles over the scene. The scene transitions to the palace, gleaming under a starry night sky. In a luxurious room, an attendant asks Maria if she is all right, as others prepare her for the evening. A delicate floral headpiece is carefully placed in Maria's flowing, light-colored hair, while being adorned with jewelry. Maria reflects on the awkwardness of sharing a bed with the king under these circumstances. A friend muses that Ero was right after all, finding it hard to believe that Maria really is the king's woman. Sitting alone, Maria looks concerned, wondering if the imprisoned Erotique is being given any food. A close-up reveals Maria's determined expression, her green eyes filled with resolve. Startled, Maria looks up as a handmaiden bursts into the room with an urgent announcement. The handmaiden exclaims, "Maria, this is," as she presents something to her. In his own quarters, the king covers his face in frustration, certain that Maria must be disappointed in him yet again. He reflects that his hands were tied, as the handmaidens view him as family, and relied on him to act after Erotique was caught. The king laments that with evidence found at the scene, he couldn't simply release him, as he's shown taking Maria's hand. Their hands are shown tightly clasped, a silent promise or plea passing between them. The king mutters, "No way," in disbelief as the doors to his chamber are suddenly flung open. Maria barges into the room, ignoring a guard's protest as she urgently calls the king's name. The masked king looks up in surprise, admitting he was just about to go see her. Maria announces that Erotique was framed and that she can clear his name, requesting he gather the involved handmaidens. The king listens intently as Maria presents him with a scroll, presumably containing her evidence. Stunned for a moment, the king agrees to her request, telling her to wait while he gathers everyone. On a moonlit terrace, the summoned palace staff wonders why they were gathered so late, assuming it's to witness the pervert's punishment. Two ladies in the crowd sigh, annoyed by all the chattering around them. Standing beside his attendant, the king observes that Ero's face has already grown thin after only half a day in the dungeon. The attendant worries that if the king sides with Maria, a foreigner, he risks losing the trust of all his loyal staff. With both Erotik's fate and Maria's future standing at stake, everything now hinges on the evidence she is about to present. The king and his attendant watch the proceedings, with the attendant wondering aloud if Maria and Erotik have some kind of plan. All eyes turn as Maria makes a grand entrance, looking composed and regal as she prepares to face her accusers. The handmaidens who made the accusations whisper among themselves as they watch Maria approach. Maria stands silently, a composed and confident smile on her face. With a sharp, sideways glance, Maria's eyes reveal her focused intent. The two accusing handmaidens whisper nervously to each other as the mood in the hall shifts against them. A decorative title card marks a transition in the story. The crowd of onlookers murmurs amongst themselves, questioning who this new guest is, but concluding that the rumors must be true. She is the king's woman. Beside Maria, the dark-haired woman looks on with a stern expression, wondering what their next move is. Maria's gaze is unwavering, her expression a mask of cool determination. The dark-haired woman watches the proceedings with an equally serious and focused expression. A woman with short, light-colored hair steps forward, demanding that the accusers tell their story again directly to the group. Startled by the direct confrontation, the two handmaidens flinch. A terrified pink-haired girl stammers as she stands beside a stern, dark-haired woman. The girl identifies herself as a lower maid, her voice trembling with fear. The woman with short hair interrupts suddenly, telling them to wait as the two accusers stare in shock. Incredulous, the two handmaidens wonder what's happening, having underestimated Maria as someone naive about the world's workings. The young maid bows her head in shame, as Maria and the dark-haired woman stand supportively beside her. Looking up at Maria's reassuring smile, the young maid addresses her respectfully as Miss. With tears in her eyes, the apprentice maid begins her confession, explaining she's from a foreign country. She reveals her story of being a former slave who was bullied by senior maids. They promise to stop if she helped them frame Erotik, with two others persuading her to go along with the plot. Now standing with Maria, the apprentice maid turns to her accusers, ready to tell the whole truth. The apprentice maid insists that the accusation against Erotik is completely false. Panicked, the two handmaidens furiously deny her claims, accusing her of lying. The other maids in the hall whisper among themselves as the conspiracy unravels. The masked king curses the idiot who ruined his plans, wondering how he'll escape this mess as his scheme crumbles. The king's eye narrows as he internally states that lying and false accusations are acts of betrayal. The king rebukes the guilty handmaidens, reminding them they've forgotten the founding ideals of Heland and have insulted their own people. Frustrated, the king grits his teeth, stating he has already explained the kingdom's principles multiple times. The two handmaidens fall to their knees, prostrating themselves and admitting they were wrong. As Maria watches, the two women offer a sincere apology to both her and the king. They confess their true motive. They wanted to become maids for the king's new woman. The dark-haired woman with Maria scolds them for their actions. As the maids explain, they schemed to create a position for themselves since Maria's was already taken. A voice rings out, demanding the maids apologize to Ero for the suffering they caused, and declaring that Maria has no intention of forgiving them either, as she stands impassively. A bruised and exhausted Erotik looks down and quietly says he's sorry. A silent command fills the air. Release Ero. The king's attendant bows in acknowledgement, confirming the order to his king. The recently awakened Stone rubs his eyes, noting that he sensed a commotion, but it seems to have been resolved already. The others greet Lord Stone, and the attendant asks if he should be awake so early, but Stone insists he's fine. Stone cheekily asks the king, Gunther, if he caused another accident while he slept, and if Maria is disappointed in him, catching the king off guard. Stone relays Maria's advice, stating that a wise ruler listens to all sides and observes objectively to find the truth. The king sincerely apologizes to Erotik, who is supported by a white-haired man, and tells the king not to worry. The king accepts the blame, but Erotik says he is just glad to be free and will be more careful to avoid future misunderstandings. Maria stands with her eyes closed as Erotik and the white-haired man depart. Maria and the masked king share a meaningful look, with the narration noting that the king knows how to cherish his people. Swoosh! The king sweeps Maria into his arms, carrying her through the grand hall. Smiling, the king announces he will escort her to the bedroom, but Maria remains silent, and unreadable. He leans in, clarifying that he will only escort her to the entrance. The two disgraced handmaidens watch in awe as the king carries Maria away. The dark-haired woman stands with Erotique and another man, crossing her arms and sighing that this is something she'll never get used to. Turning with a sharp glare, the dark-haired woman dismisses the remaining crowd, ordering everyone back to their quarters. A dark-haired person in a black cloak is held gently by the arm. The scene shifts to a grand, sun-drenched white palace under a brilliant blue sky. Inside, the white-haired vice-captain explains that rumors began to spread as soon as Lady Maria arrived. He recounts how the great king had hinted at finding a bride before leaving for Lastonia, which caused the Heland warrior closest to him to notice his unusual behavior. The vice-captain concludes that everyone eventually figured out the king's intentions, and the man at the desk agrees. Sighing, the vice-captain warns his colleague to be careful, as yesterday's incident confirmed their suspicions. The man at the desk agrees to take preventative measures and personally handle the punishment, planning to send the maids to work at construction sites for 2 years for a more humiliating fate, which the vice-captain accepts before departing. The vice-captain walks away with a relieved sigh, the narration noting the appropriate treatment. This punishment, the narration explains, will control the corrupt maids and elevate Lady Maria's status through palace rumors. Furthermore, with the accusations cleared, Maria has unexpectedly become popular among the other maids. The vice-captain suddenly stops, a look of realization on his face as he exclaims, "Found you!" He approaches Maria in a sunlit hall, calling out that he's been looking for her. Looking back at him serenely, Maria addresses him as Vice-Captain.